Chapter 1411. Many years ago, a locust tree and a peach tree were dug up by someone when their consciousness was still in its infancy. They struggled to shake their branches, trying to escape their unknown fate. But in the end, they were still pulled out from the soil. Don't struggle anymore. Your big sister has a bad temper. If you continue to be naughty, you will be beaten. The voice was very pleasant, and there was a hint of a smile in its tone. It was clearly very warm, but for some reason, their muddled consciousness felt a great fear. The locust tree and peach tree didn't dare to struggle anymore. What followed was a period of bumpiness. It was hard to say how much time passed, but just as they were about to die, they were finally planted into the earth. All right, from today onwards, the two of you will be my guard generals. The voice sounded out again. It gently clapped its hands. So, you must work hard and quickly grow up. With the sound of footsteps, the owner of the voice turned and left. The locust tree and peach tree's nascent consciousness wasn't enough to let them know what they had experienced. But there was one thing they remembered clearly. From this day onwards, they had a master, and they had to fulfill the duty of guarding the door for their master. As they worked hard to absorb strength, the locust tree and peach tree grew taller and thicker. After an unknown period of time, on a certain morning, as the dew rolled down, they suddenly awakened their consciousness. They opened their eyes at almost the same time and saw the world clearly. It was also on this day that they finally saw their master. She stood under the tree. She was very small, and she looked up with a smile on her face. However, in their eyes, she was very, very big, so big that she filled their entire field of vision and covered the endless sky above their heads. The master's smile was brilliant. She clapped her hands and said, "Congratulations to the two of you. From now on, you will be true guard generals." So from that day onwards, they had their own names. One was called the Locust Tree General, and the other was called the Peach Tree General. Their master was always very busy. When she disappeared, it would be a long time before they could see her again. But every time they went out or returned home, the master would always greet them and affectionately call them, "Hey, my guard generals, how are you?" Every time she finished speaking, she would smile happily. They had thought that this peaceful life would last forever and they could continue to be guard generals for their master. But something unexpected suddenly happened. There were many, many people. They were powerful, cruel, and ruthless. They crazily attacked, killing everyone they encountered. That was the first time they had truly seen their master in action. That petite body was actually able to erupt with such terrifying power. Every move she made caused the world to tremble. However, such a powerful master was still unable to withstand the frenzied encirclement of those invaders. They didn't fear death and didn't know what fear was at all. Even though many of them had already been killed, they still swarmed over from all directions like a tide. They were their master's gatekeepers, so they naturally had to fulfill their duty of guarding the door. However, the branches that were usually as strong as iron and stone were as fragile as paper when faced with intruders. They were easily shattered and torn apart. Pain and fear shrouded their minds. Their huge bodies were casually uprooted from the ground, and their branches were broken into several pieces. It was only because of the special characteristics of plant-type life forms that they were able to survive for the time being. But if nothing unexpected happened, death was only a matter of time. The locust tree generals and peach generals that fell to the ground could only watch helplessly as the place they guarded was slowly destroyed. Many people died. Some were familiar and some were strange. The pungent smell of blood constantly accumulated in the air. Their master had died in battle. The sky turned blood red and the earth began to break apart. Wild winds howled and howled as all things began to be destroyed. They had originally thought that they would die with their master, but the cruel invaders had been forcefully expelled with the death of their master. A piece of a corpse fell in front of them. Its familiar aura and powerful strength indicated that it was a part of their master. The fear and threat of life and death was enough to overwhelm all reason. They were completely pulled out of the ground by their roots and uncontrollably wrapped around their master's corpse. The locust tree generals and peach generals survived, and because they had swallowed the strength of their master's corpse, their strength had increased by leaps and bounds. When the divine path opened, the beast races used this opportunity to become true saints. After an internal struggle, the best of friends turned against each other and parted ways, breaking through the boundaries and going their separate ways. But this did not mean that they had forgotten their origins. On the contrary, as they grew stronger and lived longer, they gradually learned more and more things. For example, their master was a supreme ruler, and the ruler realm was the supreme realm that they yearned for even in their dreams. If a piece of their master's corpse contained enough strength to help them become true saints, then just how powerful would their master's true inheritance be? So even though many, many years had passed, they had never forgotten where they came from or what was hidden there. They had tried more than once, but in the end they had gained nothing. They could only continue to wait for the moment their master's inheritance appeared. That's right, perhaps because they had absorbed some of the strength from their master's corpse, they had an incomparably clear and intense intuition that their master's inheritance definitely existed, and it was in that place. After a long period of time, so long that they couldn't help but wonder if their intuition was wrong, their master's inheritance finally appeared. Time slowly passed. The Western Mountains. In ancient times, this place had only been an ordinary mountain. Although it was high and dangerous, there were many that could compare to it. But because of sage Scholatry's appearance, the Western Mountains suddenly rose to become one of the top holy lands in the vast young world. The towering ancient scholar tree stood on the mountain ridge, its thick roots penetrating deep into the mountain. Its crown was extremely flourishing, casting an endless shadow. Sage Scholatry stood under the ancient scholar tree with his hands behind his back, looking at his own body from the perspective of a bystander. It was indeed a rather wonderful feeling. He and the yard master had been together for many years, and they had both received gifts from their master. That was how they had reached their current realm, and they naturally had some sense of each other. Not long ago, Sage Scholatry discovered the yard master's secret. His soul was very weak, almost on the verge of collapse sure enough. The arrangements he had made all those years ago had finally taken effect. As long as the yard master perished, everything he had would become Sage Scholatry's. Perhaps that would be the turning point for him to break through his limits and become a ruler. Having waited for many years, Sage Scholatry didn't mind waiting for a while longer. On the contrary, he had to be wary of the yard master trying to drag him down with her if she had nowhere else to go. So Sage Scholatry retracted all his tentacles and entrenched himself in his old lair in the Western Mountains with a taciturn attitude. He had even guessed that the yard master would definitely come to the Western Mountains and force him to fight a great battle before she finally perished. Sage Scholatry had already thought of a way to deal with her. He couldn't possibly give the yard master the chance to drag him down with her. But changes always came faster than plans. Beneath the towering ancient scholar tree, a scholar tree with his hands behind his back, Sage Scholatry's expression changed abruptly. He raised his head and looked at the sky above the ancient scholar tree. The space there was vibrating, setting off circles of ripples. In the world of his senses, excitement and ecstasy were like a great tide, frantically washing over his mind. His master's inheritance had appeared. Without the slightest hesitation, Sage Scholatry took a step forward, and his figure instantly merged with the towering ancient scholar tree. The next moment, the earth quaked and the mountains shook. The entire Western Mountains were shattering, and countless thick roots were pulled out from the ground. The ancient scholar tree shot up into the sky, collided into the vibrating space, and disappeared. His master's inheritance represented the path to becoming a ruler. He had to fight for it. The other was that Sage Scholatry would never give the yard master any chance to make a comeback. The inheritance had already appeared. since he could sense it and was directly summoned. The yard master could also obtain it. If he didn't go, wouldn't that mean he had to give the inheritance to the yard master? Thus, on this day, the Western Mountains' ancient scholar tree broke through the mountain, smashing through the void. Beside the ball of light, space violently shook. A massive shadow rushed out, tearing apart space and causing countless cracks to spread out in all directions. West Mountain Scholartree Sage had arrived. After forcing back Chinyu with a single strike, he no longer cared about him. Now all of his attention was focused on that dazzling ball of light. Branches swayed, causing countless leaves to rub against each other, emitting rustling sounds like a tide. Ruler Great Tao! Ruler Great Tao! There was no mistake, absolutely no mistake. As long as he could obtain it, he could break through his shackles and become one of the strongest existences in the world. Bang! The ancient pagoda tree that supported the sky whistled as it rushed out. Countless branches whizzed out, and it was like a large net that covered the heavens and the earth, wrapping the ball of light within it. Chinyu frowned, anger surging in his eyes. He didn't know why Sage Scholartree was able to directly arrive here, but no matter what, he absolutely could not allow the ruler Great Tao to be obtained by him. He took a step forward, and a powerful aura broke out from his body. His robes fluttered, and his black hair fluttered. At this moment, Chinyu released his greatest strength without reservation. He raised his hand and clenched his fist, ready to punch forward. But just as he was about to strike, there was a loud explosion, and space shattered once more. The ancient peach tree tore through space and descended. Give it to him. A low and calm voice sounded in Chinyu's ears. His eyes flashed with hesitation and confusion. He took a deep breath and let go, turning around and bowing. Disciple Chinyu greets teacher. When he attacked with all his strength, he couldn't conceal himself perfectly, so it wasn't surprising that the yard master could recognize him. The peach tree was silent for a moment, and then it said softly, Chinyu, you are even more outstanding than I imagined. You were actually able to find the location of Master's inheritance. After a pause, it continued, in addition, I must admit that when I told you about the existence of the ever-burning flame, I did have some selfish motives. The yard master didn't elaborate, but when he saw the ruler Great Tao appear and Sage Scholartree and the yard master descend at almost the same time, Chinyu reacted no matter how slow he was. Perhaps from the very beginning, the yard master had thought of using Chinyu's hands to find the ruler's inheritance, and then change her current situation to prolong her life. He was definitely unhappy because the yard master hadn't been honest with him. But putting himself in her shoes, it was reasonable for the yard master to make such a decision. Moreover, now wasn't the time to consider such things. The ruler Great Tao was right in front of him, and Sage Scholartree had already tried to snatch it. Taking a deep breath, Chinyu asked in a low voice, why? The yard master smiled. Don't worry, he won't be able to get it. She paused, and her voice became faintly discernible with a hint of emotion. No wonder Master was so good to us back then. She must have compensated us in advance. She planned everything from the very beginning. The ruler Great Tao is real, but Sage Scholartree, and I didn't have the chance to dip our hands in it. You will naturally understand once you continue watching. Chinyu frowned, watching Sage Scholartree's branches interweave into a large net that swallowed the dazzling ball of light. He sighed softly in his heart. It was too late to make a move now. He could only hope that what the yard master said was right. Otherwise, they would be in deep trouble. Ha 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 ha. Sage Scholartree's hearty laughter resounded through the world. The ruler Great Tao. I have finally obtained the ruler Great Tao. From now on, the entire world will crawl and tremble in front of me. Countless branches wildly contracted and rotated like tentacles, squirming as they tried to fuse the ruler Great Tao into the yard master's body. On the thick tree trunk, Sage Scholartree's ecstatic face appeared. He stared at the yard master from high above. You know that you don't have long to live, So you want to hand over the ruler Great Tao. What a wise decision. For this sake, as long as you are willing to crawl in front of me, repent and swear loyalty to me, and serve me for eternity, I might be able to pull you back from the brink of death and grant you a new life. The Yard Master had a calm expression. She looked up at Sage Scholatry, and her lips curled up in a mocking smile. Even at this moment, you still haven't noticed? General Scholatry, I truly feel sorrow for you. Sage Scholatry frowned, his voice rolling like thunder. Have you gone mad? The Yard Master shook her head. You and I are Master's gatekeepers, and we will always be gatekeepers. Our level and vision cannot compare to Master's. So, ever since Master brought us back and planted us at the gate, we have only been a pawn planted by Master for countless years. You and I are both insignificant and insignificant parts of the game. Sage Scholatry laughed. I don't understand what you are talking about, but now that I have obtained the Great Tao, the ruler Great Tao is just around the corner. At that time, I will be in existence on par with Master. No, she is no longer qualified to be called Master by me. Looking at Sage Scholatry, the Yard Master fell silent. A trace of disappointment and gloom appeared in the depths of her eyes. She didn't continue the conversation and turned to look at Chinyu. From today onwards, the peach garden will be handed over to you. I have no other request. I only hope that you can remember your previous promise. If possible in the future, you must ensure that Peach Maiden can live a safe life. As she finished speaking, she stared at Chinyu, waiting for his response. Chinyu didn't know what she wanted to do, but he could clearly feel the Yard Master's determination. He took a deep breath and cupped his hands. Rest assured, Yard Master, I will definitely do what I promised. Good. I believe in you. The Yard Master laughed. The entire peach tree trembled violently. She suddenly broke through the air and rushed towards Sage Scholatry. I have lived a long life and thought that I had become a saint, one of the strongest beings in the world. But I never expected that I would end up as someone else's pawn. I have a grudge, but think about it carefully. If Master hadn't acted in the past, how could the Peach Garden Master have lived to this day? My life and my cultivation were bestowed upon me by Master. Now that I have returned them, it can be considered a perfect ending. On the tree, Sage Scholatry's face was filled with shock and anger. He didn't know what had happened, but as he watched the laughing Yard Master rush towards him, he couldn't help but feel fear in his heart. It was as if something extremely terrifying was about to happen. Get lost. Boom! An astonishing aura erupted from Sage Scholatry. After obtaining the ruler's mark, his strength had clearly increased tremendously. But at this moment, Sage Scholatry's expression suddenly changed. It was as if someone had pressed a switch that controlled his body, because all the strength in his body instantly came to a standstill. His body stiffened like iron, and his face was filled with horror. And at this time, the Yard Master had arrived. The towering ancient scholar tree and the towering peach tree were like two mountains that collided with each other without the slightest pause. But unexpectedly, not a single sound was emitted. The ancient scholar tree and the peach tree were like two bubbles, but also like two shadows. The moment they came into contact, they fused together. A dazzling light suddenly erupted, as if a great sun had descended upon this place. Ah, no, impossible! Sage Scholatry screamed in shock and anger. It was clear that he had encountered something extremely terrifying. Chinyu's pupils violently shrank. As the saying went, the onlooker had a clearer view of everything. From the perspective of a third party, he could see everything that was happening. The light that was as bright as a great sun came from the ruler's great Tao. Although it was releasing endless light, in reality, it was like a black hole that was slowly swallowing up Sage Scholatry and the Yard Master, turning them into a part of itself. And during this process, Sage Scholatry and the Yard Master were unable to move at all. much less put up any effective resistance. They were like prey that had been immobilized. They could only watch helplessly as they were slowly swallowed into the belly. One could imagine how it felt. Chinyu sucked in a breath of cold air, feeling a chill from the bottom of his heart. When he thought of what the yardmaster had said before, he felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. She had said that all of this was the ruler's chess piece, and that he and Sage Scholatry were only an extremely insignificant part of the game. His thoughts uncontrollably spread outwards. Suddenly, a hair-raising thought appeared in the depths of Chinyu's mind. The part of the ruler's corpse that Sage Scholatry and the yardmaster had absorbed back then might not have been a coincidence. Someone had deliberately thrown a part of the corpse in front of them, using it to achieve some sort of goal. And that person was without a doubt the ruler, who had escaped by faking his death. According to the information he had now, he could now try to restore what had happened back then. First, the ones who had attacked the world Zeroth land and brazenly raised the butcher's knife against the ruler should have been Western Wilderness and that clan. Only they had the strength to complete the task of killing the ruler. Disregarding Western Wilderness and that clan's motives for brazenly slaughtering the ruler had escaped by faking his death during the calamity. But during this process, there should have been some flaws. Thus, she had arranged the everlasting flame and the avatar of the rulers were within the palace. This was a trap to give Western Wilderness and that clan a pleasant surprise, but it was also a chance to erase this flaw and ensure that she could continue hiding. Before this, Chin-yu had sensed that something was amiss. He had discovered that the actions of the rulers will avatar were different from what he had imagined. Perhaps some other unforeseen event had occurred, and the existence of Sage Scholatry and the yardmaster was to correct any possible accidents. This was because it was clear that as Sage Scholatry and the yardmaster were swallowed, the true divine Great Tao was awakening, or more accurately speaking, a powerful aura hidden within it was being activated. In other words, Sage Scholatry and the yardmaster, who had absorbed the ruler's corpse and relied on it to ascend to the true divine level, were truly nothing more than chess pieces that the ruler had placed there. If they couldn't be used, then so be it. But if something went wrong, the two of them would be summoned here because of the appearance of the ruler's great Tao. They would provide strength for the awakening of the ruler's great Tao. They were like two tools that had lived to store strength in order to deal with today's unforeseen event. The yard master seemed to have noticed all of this, which was why she had acted like this before. As for Sage Scholatry, he had been kept in the dark from beginning to end. Chin-yu took a deep breath. Fear and astonishment interweaved in his eyes. He had a deeper understanding of the terror of the ruler level. Their terror wasn't limited to their cultivation, but also their deep and terrifying schemes. Two powerhouses at the peak of the true divine level had crossed countless years, yet they had been toyed with in the palm of their hands. I have a great destiny. In the future, I will definitely become a ruler. How could I be someone else's chess piece? I absolutely refused to believe this. Sage Scholatry's enraged and resentful roar reverberated in the air like a thunderclap. It was clear that he had finally understood. The Sky Palace Scholatry tree frantically struggled, but it was of no use. Under the illumination of the light, the strength within his body was completely out of control. He couldn't mobilize the slightest bit of it. No, I can't accept this. I can't accept this. Sage Scholatry's voice became smaller and smaller. At the same time, the light became increasingly brilliant, gradually turning into a true sun. The Sky Palace Scholatry tree and the towering peach tree became more and more illusory. Finally, they were like real shadows, slowly purified and vanishing in the light. Chin-yu's body stiffened. He could clearly sense that the auras that belonged to Sage Scholatry and the yardmaster had completely disappeared. Two peak, true, divine level existences had quietly perished here. Suddenly, all the light vanished. Chin-yu finally saw the true appearance of the great Tao of a ruler. It was a stone. That's right, it was a stone that wasn't smooth and smooth. It was like a stone that could be picked up from the roadside of a river. The only strange thing was that its entire body was pitch black, as if it had eaten a great deal of ink. When Chinyu looked at it, he felt as if he would be pulled into it. Oh, it was a little familiar. But unfortunately, this stone didn't give Chinyu any time to think. With a swoosh, it instantly approached. Its speed was astonishing. It was so fast that even with Chinyu's cultivation, he had no way of dodging it. He could only watch as it crashed into his chest and melted into it. That's right, this stone contained the transcendent, great Tao of a ruler. It had even swallowed sage scholarly and the yard master right in front of Chinyu's eyes, and yet it had directly melted into Chinyu's body. It would be a lie to say that he wasn't panicking. Before this, Chinyu had thought of taking it into his hands. But after personally witnessing the fate of sage scholarly and the yard master, he had long since given up on that idea. What nonsense! Who would dare to carry such a man-eating thing with them? Wouldn't they be afraid that it would suddenly open its mouth and swallow them? Calm down, don't panic. Taking a deep breath, Chinyu focused his mind and looked within himself. But what caused his expression to change again and again was that he couldn't find any trace of the stone's existence. It was as if the moment it entered Chinyu's body, it had directly melded into his flesh and blood, becoming one with him. All of a sudden, "Kacha! Kacha!" sounds of shattering rang in his ears. Chinyu's complexion changed. He remembered that he seemed to have forgotten something. He looked up and saw that in the distance, as the everlasting flame vanished, the palace that had completely appeared had collapsed and shattered. The vortex formed by the flowing light on its surface had vanished along with it. Thus, within the vortex, Yao Tao was revealed. Her eyes were closed as she floated in the air. Shwa, her eyes opened. Their black and white were clear and translucent, but they were terrifyingly cold. They were like ice crystals without the least bit of warmth, and there were no fluctuations of emotion. Looking up, her eyes fell on Chinyu. Yao Tao took a step forward, lifted her hand, and pressed it down. Rumble, rumble. At this moment, it was like a heavenly river was toppling over. A terrifying strength surged forth like a tide. She wanted to kill Chinyu. Chapter 14:12. The strength of the chief god's will avatar had been fully displayed when it slaughtered 6 ancient true saints. Now that it had fused with Yao Tao, it was impossible to weaken each other's strength. Otherwise, the chief god's will avatar wouldn't have agreed to this. The reason he mentioned this was because the current Yao Tao, or perhaps the chief god's will version of Yao Tao. Well, let me say something else. When the resentful spirit, Li Siji, and the seamless saint combined into a group skin, it gave off a strange and disgusting feeling. But now Yao Tao and the chief god's will avatar had fused together. They were also of the same gender, but the feeling they gave off was completely different. It was a bit novel, a bit exciting, and there was even an invisible ripple of energy. It seemed there really was a difference between men and women. The topic had wandered off, so it was brought back. Chinyu looked up at Yao Tao, his expression grim. Before his pupils could shrink, he instinctively responded. He lifted a hand and punched out. With a loud explosion, it was like a boulder smashing into a lake, causing billowing waves to rise up. But just as the waves rose up, they seemed to be crushed by a mountain. The waves snapped in half, as if they had been cut by a blade. With a stuffy cough, Chinyu drew backwards. The clothes on his chest were torn to shreds, revealing a delicate purple palm print. Terrifyingly strong. At this time, Chinyu felt as if he couldn't contend with her at all. It was a complete suppression on a completely different level. At this moment, Yao Tao, who had her hand pressed down, took a step forward without any hesitation and continued her attack. Without any fancy moves, she lifted her hand and brought it down again. But this time, the feeling Chinyu felt was even more terrifying. Chinyu took a deep breath and his chest puffed out. Shield guard. Rumble, rumble. A formidable strength broke out from his body. The space around him violently shook and the shadow of a shield appeared. It was extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, the shadow condensed into reality. This shield was silver white, and countless runes wove together on its surface. As the shield's shadow appeared, not only did the spatial shaking not disappear, but it became even more intense. The power of space. This shield shadow and every rune that appeared on its surface released a powerful aura that could interfere with space. And this was the foundation of the shield guard. Space shook. Although it seemed chaotic, the truth was that there were countless spatial faults within. Each spatial fault was able to counteract some of the invading strength from the outside world, finally resisting it. But Qin Yu had only just started cultivating it and was far from crossing the threshold, let alone being able to display its true might. Of course, more importantly, Yao Tao's current strength was truly ridiculously strong. Thus, after Qin Yu learned this supernatural ability, the first time he used it could only be described as tragic. The layers of space that were stacked together trembled. They were as fragile as bubbles and were instantly pierced through. Qin Yu spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying backwards. This time, it wasn't as simple as a palm print appearing on his chest. His chest caved in, and it was unknown how many bones were broken. And what was even more terrifying was that a destructive strength had invaded into his body. As it spread outwards, everything within its range was destroyed. His bones were shattered, and he lost his vitality, while his internal organs were shattered inch by inch. If it wasn't for the fact that his body of laws was sufficiently powerful and possessed astonishing vitality, this strike would have been fatal. But even if the body of rules didn't die from this strike, it would take time to recover. And Yao Tao clearly didn't plan on giving Qin Yu any time to recover. Tricks were ultimately based on power, so as long as one had enough power, one would be able to use it. Well, there was no point in playing tricks. Yao Tao clearly held onto this train of thought. Her third attack was still the same as before. She lifted her hand and pressed forward. It was the kind of casual lifting of a hand without any ruthlessness or killing intent. But when combined with her cold expression and emotionless eyes, it gave off an even more terrifying feeling. Qin Yu clenched his teeth. The half-completed, great Tao in his body trembled. He had no other choice but to use the sword he had obtained in the East Sea. If he had to pay the price, then so be it. It was better than being smacked to death by Yao Tao. But even if he used the sword, he could only survive one more time. If Yao Tao continued to attack, then there really wasn't anything he could do. His previous premonition had been right. This woman was a star of calamity. As expected, he was about to suffer a great loss at her hands. Why hadn't the sovereign great Tao made its move yet? That's right. This was the fundamental reason why Qin Yu could still barely maintain his calm, even though he was in a sorry state and had suffered serious injuries from the Heaven Peach Hammer. Sage Scalatree and the Garden Mistress had been summoned and swallowed up by the sovereign great Tao to provide it with strength. If nothing went wrong, it would soon awaken. Otherwise, what was the point of the saint doing all of this in the past? Was it just to have the sovereign great Tao fuse into Qin Yu's body and then have her explode from the Heaven Peach Hammer? That was impossible. Thus, there was a high chance that the sovereign great Tao still needed some time to activate. And what Qin Yu needed to do now was to work hard to survive during this period of time so that he wouldn't be killed. He suddenly realized why the sovereign great Tao wanted to fuse into his body. Perhaps it wanted to use Qin Yu as a shield to buy time for itself. There was no time to think about this. The cry of a sword rang out. Qin Yu stuffily coughed, and his complexion paled. Every inch of his flesh and blood violently twitched. The terrifying feeling of being sucked out made him feel as if he were being grabbed by a giant, invisible hand, crazily kneading and squeezing him. It was like every bit of strength in his body was being forcefully squeezed out. But in this extremely painful situation, Qin Yu couldn't control his body. He lifted a hand and grasped forward. Sword shadows appeared and rapidly solidified. With another sword cry, Qin Yu felt like he had been struck in the head with a heavy stick. His field of vision fell into darkness. He felt as if his soul had been ruthlessly stabbed by something that wasn't very sharp and was covered in rust. The pain was so intense that his mind was on the verge of collapse. His flesh and blood trembled even more violently, and yet he couldn't show any expression on his face. In fact, his aura was as stiff and cold as his face, giving off a ghastly feeling. Qin Yu grasped the sword in his hand and slashed forward. Bang! Thunderclaps seemed to explode in his ears. The moment the sword fell, his consciousness fell into a blank. By the time Qin Yu regained his composure, he saw that Yao Tao had been sent flying far away. She lifted a hand to block in front of her. A clear line of blood appeared on her fair and delicate palm. It seemed shallow, but her pale complexion and the large bloodstains on her dress indicated that the damage caused by this sword wasn't as simple as it seemed. But even though he knew that Yao Tao was injured and this was the best time to continue attacking or turn around to flee, Qin Yu couldn't do it. Who? He gasped for breath, as if he were pulling on an incomparably worn bellows. Every time he did so, a burning pain would rise up in his chest. The words sore and weak could no longer describe Qin Yu's current state. His entire body was like a limp shrimp, and all he had left was the strength to gasp for breath. He had reached his limit. He had really reached his limit this time, let alone the fact that he didn't have any cards left in his hands to resist Yao Tao. Even if he did, he didn't have the strength to continue using them. With a thud, he slumped to the ground. He covered his mouth and nose as he violently coughed. Even if he didn't look down, he knew that he was coughing up blood. Moreover, it was a large amount of blood. His entire palm was wet. Indeed, in this world, it was impossible for everything to go as one imagined. Qin Yu had clearly schemed against someone else and was prepared to be the fisherman that reaped the benefits. But accidents always occurred outside of his plans, and things uncontrollably developed to the step. With great difficulty, his coughing slowed down a little. Qin Yu took several deep breaths, suppressing the tumbling nausea in his chest. I say, you should wake up by now. I've already reached my limit. If I do it again, I'll definitely die. There was no response. The sovereign great Tao that had fused into his body had completely vanished. But at this time Yao Tao moved. She stepped forwards, ignoring the barriers of space. When she lifted her foot, she was far away, but when she landed, she was right in front of him. She lowered her head, her eyes meeting Qin Yu's. Then, she lifted her hand and grabbed Qin Yu's neck. Without speaking, without even the slightest fluctuation in her eyes, Yao Tao's fingers tightened. At this time, Qin Yu could clearly hear his Adam's apple emitting cracking sounds as it withstood the powerful pressure of the outside world. Moreover, if it weren't for the fact that his body of rules was strong enough, it would have already been crushed to pieces. The sovereign great Tao still didn't respond. Qin Yu bitterly smiled. He began to regret not attacking Yao Tao at the start. Otherwise, things wouldn't have developed to this stage. He really didn't expect that he would die in the hands of this woman. But at this time, a fluctuation appeared in Yao Tao's eyes. She clenched her fingers and stopped where she was. You promised me that you would only attack 3 times. I did say that, but his body contains that woman's aura. I must kill him. He cannot die. You want to resist me? The one who spoke was Yao Tao. Moreover, whether it was her voice or her tone, or even the pauses between her words, they were completely the same. Yet there was a strange feeling that they were completely different. It was like there was another will hidden within Yao Tao's body, the avatar of the sovereign great Tao. Qin Yu almost instantly thought of this. This also explained why Yao Tao had been the one to appear in the end, and why she had such terrifying strength. Could it be that in recent times the phrase, if you're naughty, I'm naughty too, had become popular? With a stuffy cough, blood flowed out from the corners of Yao Tao's lips. Countless tiny cracks appeared on the surface of her body. They were very, very small. If one didn't look carefully, they wouldn't be able to detect them. But the truth was that these cracks were very deep, so deep that they sank into her body. They were deep enough to disintegrate Yao Tao into countless pieces. I already promised you that I would attack Qin Yu 3 times. Since he hasn't died, that means he has a reason to live. So, you cannot attack again now. Otherwise, believe me, the result will not be what you want to see. Chapter 14:13. Yao Tao took a deep breath, her voice even colder. Now, give me control of your body. There was complete silence. Peepa, Peepa. On the surface of Yao Tao's body, the tiny but shockingly deep cracks suddenly spread outwards, forming cracks of varying sizes. Dark red beads of blood overflowed from these cracks. In almost an instant, Yao Tao's entire body was soaked. Her dress was dyed the color of blood, a dazzling red. I hope you don't regret this. Yao Tao closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were still black and white, but there was a hint of exhaustion in their depths. She glanced at Qin Yu and took a step back. I don't know how much longer I can threaten her. It's best if you leave now. Qin Yu gasped for breath. The powerful regenerative abilities of his body of rules were fully displayed at this moment. Although he had been severely wounded and had been sucked out by that terrifying sword, nearly causing him to lose his life, he had managed to restore some of his mobility in a short period of time. Of course, this so-called mobility was only enough to struggle to stand up. He wouldn't continue to lie on the ground and stare up at Yao Tao. He was still far from being able to jump around, or, to be more precise, turn around and leave. Cough, cough. Just moving a little affected his injuries, and he began to violently cough. This was the cardiac tearing lung. As he coughed, he began to vomit blood. But as he did, Qin Yu felt his chest relax, and he felt much more comfortable. Yao Tao revealed a nervous expression. Are you okay? Qin Yu waved his hand, indicating that she didn't need to come over. I won't die. This situation was quite strange. It was clearly Yao Tao who had attacked him and left him in such a state, but now she was suddenly concerned about him. Perhaps thinking of this, Yao Tao revealed a look of guilt. I'm sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. It's just... Qin Yu let out a deep breath. I know. He looked at Yao Tao, a flash of hesitation in his eyes. He said in a low voice, Leave now. Although the sovereign great Tao hadn't moved after fusing into his body, it definitely wouldn't remain like this forever. In any case, Yao Tao had saved Qin Yu's life. This was an indisputable fact. Even if he knew that letting Yao Tao leave was an extremely stupid thing to do, he couldn't repay kindness with enmity. After today, the grudges between them were settled. The next time they met, they would have to rely on their own methods. Qin Yu never doubted that he would become enemies with Yao Tao. This involved Peach Girl and involved the struggle between his soul seed avatar and his main body. No matter what, he couldn't allow this to happen. Yao Tao's expression changed slightly, as if she had thought of something. She took a step forward and retreated. Space rippled as her figure rapidly turned blurry. At this moment, a cold snort sounded out. The voice was filled with annoyance and a bit of resentment. Just now, she was nearly smashed to pieces by you, but you actually let her go like that. Qin Yu, is there a hole in your brain? Shua, a phantom suddenly walked out of his body. At first, it was extremely blurry, but in the blink of an eye it became solid. They had the same tall and slender figure, the same domineering curves, and even the blurry faces were exactly the same. The woman in front of him was exactly the same as the avatar of the rulers he had seen in the main hall, as if they had been carved from the same mold. She raised her hand and clenched her fist. The rapidly retreating Yao Tao let out a muffled groan as her figure was forcefully interrupted and returned to reality. She staggered. The space around her shook and shattered. Yao Tao's eyes were filled with panic and anger, but they only lasted for a moment before turning into icy indifference. Her entire aura changed. She was like an ancient block of ice, emitting a cold chill. You've come." She spoke, the chill in her eyes becoming even deeper. The woman who came later lifted a hand and pointed forwards. Across from her, Yao Tao froze, her entire body seeming to freeze. Then there was no then. After easily slaughtering 6 ancient true saints and fusing together with Yao Tao, the avatar of the rulers had casually smashed Qin Yu into this pitiful state. Yet, with just a light finger, she had been suppressed where she stood. Qin Yu's heart skipped a beat. At this time, a thought suddenly appeared in his mind. Were all women these days so terrifying? The feeling that Yao Tao gave him was that she was so formidable that he couldn't contend with her. Even if he used all of his strength and even used the sword of the East Sea, he would only barely be able to preserve his life. But such a Yao Tao had actually been suppressed by a single finger, let alone the several waves of attacks between them. The truth was that she only had time to say a few words. She didn't even have a chance to attack before everything was over. Just how strong was the woman who appeared later? In truth, this already surpassed the limits of Qin Yu's imagination, because in his opinion, the current Yao Tao was in no way weaker than a ruler. In other words, she could suppress a ruler with a single finger. If he didn't see this with his own eyes, he wouldn't have believed it. What are you daydreaming for? Hurry up and kill her, and this matter will be over. The woman frowned, her tone unkind. She felt full of resentment, as if she had been forcefully dragged out of her sweet dreams. She felt extremely unhappy. But why did I have to do it? Qin Yu looked up. The woman furrowed her eyebrows. She patiently explained, because of certain reasons I cannot kill her. So it can only be you. Qin Yu bitterly smiled. Senior, look at my current appearance. It's already not easy for me to stay alive, so where would I have the strength to kill someone? You humph. The woman clenched her teeth. Why did I choose you in the first place? I was too blind to have been beaten into this state by her. Qin Yu bitterly smiled. Although there was a high chance that this person in front of him wouldn't harm him, it was still best to be cautious. She could say whatever she wanted, and he would pretend he didn't hear her. The woman paced back and forth several times. She rubbed her temples, a distressed expression on her face. I can't stay here for too long, and I can't kill her. What should I do? Qin Yu raised a hand. Senior, how about you help me heal my wounds first? The woman rolled her eyes. Do you think I can't think of such a simple method? She took a deep breath. Isn't it because you are too weak right now? So weak that you can't even withstand a bit of my strength. I am willing to help you heal your wounds. But as long as I pour a bit of my strength into you, your entire body will explode like an overinflated balloon. Qin Yu's face stiffened. He quietly lowered his hand. Fine, I'll pretend I didn't say anything. Thump, thump, thump. The woman's footsteps suddenly became heavy. She looked up, a fierce light in her eyes. No matter what, I must kill her today. At worst, I'll just have to sleep for a bit longer. She lifted a hand, about to point out. Qin Yu suddenly said, Senior, wait. His forehead was covered with beads of sweat. He was a bit scared by this woman. How could she change her mind so quickly? He couldn't kill her just now, but now she wanted to do it herself. If the chief gods will avatar wanted to kill him, Qin Yu wouldn't care about her life or death. On the contrary, he would clap his hands in glee. But Yao Tao couldn't die, at least not now. The soul seed avatar was strong to such a degree, so it was bound to be closely related to the main body. Peach Girl was in an extremely bad state to begin with, and the Garden Master had already been swallowed by the chief god's great Tao. In other words, if something happened to Peach Girl and Qin Yu wasn't around, no one in the Peach Garden could help her. If Peach Girl perished because of this, Qin Yu knew the cultivation method of the myriad soul Tao. As long as the main body died, all the soul seeds would perish together. And this was also the reason why Yao Tao didn't wait any longer and chose to leave seclusion to swallow Peach Girl. She didn't dare to take the risk of waiting any longer. The woman frowned and looked at him impatiently. What are you trying to say? Qin Yu coughed. I just think that killing Yao Tao, killing the chief gods will avatar isn't a wise choice. The woman sneered. Get to the point. The point is that, in my opinion, Senior might as well attack first and seal the chief gods will avatar here. Later, when you think of a way you can kill her. Like this, Senior wouldn't need to pay any extra price. Isn't that the best of both worlds? Qin Yu's forehead beaded with sweat as he spoke. Even he thought these words were ancient. He was afraid that the woman would sneer and raise her hand to exterminate him first. But then, the woman's reaction caused Qin Yu's eyes to widen, and he couldn't help but be stunned. Good idea. She walked over and patted Qin Yu with a bright smile. I never thought that you would have such a smart head. I take back what I said before. My eyesight is as sharp as ever. Qin Yu, are you sure that what you should be doing right now isn't digging out your eyeballs and playing with them in bubbles? Or perhaps you should find a place to pour out the water in your brain. In the past, your methods were quite sharp. How come it was that after all these years, even though your cultivation had clearly increased, your brain wasn't as good as before? Could it be that as one's cultivation increased and they reached a certain level, their brains would be damaged instead? Qin Yu's mind was a mess. Even he felt that these thoughts were extremely senseless. Without a doubt, the woman who had walked out from his body and suppressed Yao Tao with a finger was the master of World Zero from the distant past. She was also the master that sage Scholatry and the Garden Master spoke of. She was the one who had arranged all of this and played everyone on the chessboard. Above was the Western Desolation and that clan. Above was the avatar of the ruler's will. Below was the Garden Master, Sage Scholatry, and 6 ancient true saints. TSK, just take a look. Even a true saint who had stepped onto the peak of vast Yang Extreme could only be ranked as a lower level. From this, one could imagine just how skilled the ruler was. As Qin Yu was lost in his thoughts, the woman in front of him suddenly attacked. She flicked her sleeves, and there was the sound of breaking air. In the distance, the shattered fragments of the palace flew over at an astonishing speed, and as they flew over, they seemed to be infused with strength. Their dim surfaces began to glow once more, and their auras faintly resonated with each other. They gave off an inexplicably heavy and oppressive feeling. But before this, they had clearly been the ruins of a palace that had collapsed, turning the rotten into the miraculous. This was the second label that Qin Yu had placed on the woman in front of him besides the word formidable. Or perhaps this was also part of her plan. She had arranged this in the palace a long time ago. Comparatively speaking, the former was somewhat easier to accept. But if it was the latter, that was far too terrifying. Fragments of the palace floated around Yao Tao. The woman stepped forwards, looking down from above. I know that you can hear me right now. Then I will give you a chance. Kill the woman who is controlling your body, and I will give you a chance to live. Otherwise, she sneered several times. She flicked her fingers, and the fragments of the palace immediately contracted. Kacha! Kacha! Where they connected, they emitted light, cracking sounds. These sounds were emitted when they collided with each other. But at the moment of impact, they fused together, forming a spherical half-sealed space. The so-called half-sealed space referred to the fact that the fragments of the palace hadn't completely fused together yet. There were still massive gaps between them, but it was clear that if she wanted to, she only needed a single thought to completely fuse the fragments of the palace together, turning the interior into a sealed and dark cage without the slightest bit of light. The woman's lips curled up. She slowly said, "Trust me. As long as I want to, this sealed cage is enough to trap you inside forever. In other words, until death arrives, you will spend your days in darkness and torment. I've tasted a similar feeling for a period of time, so believe me, it's definitely not a very comfortable feeling. If you can really do it, it is best that you immediately agree to it, and even if you can't, you should at least try your best." Qin Yu's complexion changed, revealing a dignified look. This was because it was clear that the person the ruler was speaking to wasn't the ruler's will avatar, but Yao Tao. She wanted to force Yao Tao to attack and kill the ruler's will avatar. And this idea seemed to have been inspired by him, as expected. How could a creature like the ruler be a naive fool? Everything she had revealed was probably just one side of the multifaceted picture, and you would never know what was hidden beneath these different faces. Chapter 14:14. Within the semi-closed spherical seal, Yao Tao's figure didn't move at all. At this time, she was still in a state of being forcefully suppressed. Her eyes grew colder and colder, and a hint of derision flickered in their depths. Clearly, she didn't believe that the sovereign's actions would be of any use. Kill her? Regardless of whether Yao Tao had the guts or not. Even if she did, she would only be digging her own grave. Hey, if it weren't for the oath I made in the past, I would have crushed you to death with a single breath. The ruler's killing intent soared. A terrifying aura erupted from his body, causing Chinyu to feel as if he were suffocating. The only thing that was a bit inappropriate was probably using the word I. It really did ruin the ruler's dignity and solemnity. The cold eyes in the sealed space were filled with even more ridicule. In fact, it wasn't hard to guess what it meant. Don't shoot your mouth off. If you have the guts, then kill me now. She clearly knew just how terrifying the ruler was, and yet she still dared to act in such a manner. Either she was incredibly bold, so bold that she didn't even fear death, but from how the ruler's will avatar had tricked Chinyu, the chances that she wasn't afraid of death were extremely low. In other words, there must be some other scheme involved. The sovereign lord's avatar was intentionally trying to provoke her. Are you trying to goad me into action? You really know me well enough to know that I can't stand this. The ruler clenched his jaws, just as Chinyu was about to rush out and stop this woman who could flip a page at any moment. She suddenly sneered and said, "But this time I won't be fooled. Yao Tao, don't ask me how I know your name. As long as I want to know, there are no secrets in this world. So listen carefully. Out of the anger in my heart, I have decided to continue to increase the stakes. As long as you can kill her, not only will I forgive your sins, but I will also give you additional compensation. For example, the pure remnant power of a sovereign lord's will clone after it's killed." Inside the sealed space, Yao Tao used her actions to make her choice. A gloomy expression suddenly appeared in the depths of her cold eyes, mixed with shock and anger. She made her move. Chinyu frowned, helplessness in his eyes. This was the decision of the ruler. There was no way he could interfere. It was true that Yao Tao was strong and had all sorts of strange tricks up her sleeve. However, she was facing a terrifying clone of the sovereign lord's will. He could easily kill 6 ancient true sages. Among them, there was no lack of extremely strong existences like the Seamless Sage. Their chances of victory were slim. It could even be said that it was like throwing an egg against a stone. The hegemon clapped his hands and laughed. "Excellent. You made a wise choice. However, things would not develop in a good direction just because of her words. Yao Tao, who had tried to kill the sovereign will clone, would be met with a vicious backlash. Her body would be the battlefield, and a brutal slaughter would ensue. The most direct observation was that Yao Tao's exposed flesh suddenly ruptured, and countless cracks appeared, densely covering every inch of his body. The cold, killing intent in the clone's eyes made it clear that it was the sovereign lord's will clone that was in control of the fleshly body. It was obvious that she had the absolute upper hand in this internal battle. Her torn flesh trembled, and dark red beads of blood seeped out of her wounds, instantly soaking her entire body. However, this was only the beginning. More and more blood flowed out, but because of the sovereign suppression, the blood couldn't flow out. It could only remain sealed on the surface of the body. As time passed, more and more blood accumulated, gradually forming a blood cocoon that wrapped around Yao Tao's body. It was hard to imagine that such a shocking amount of blood was flowing through her small body, But as time passed, the speed at which the beads of blood seeped out of her wounds began to slow down. Her face was as pale as paper. Her exposed palms and 5 delicate white fingers were now translucent. If one looked at them, they could see faint blue blood vessels running through them. Her lips were withered, her eyes were dim, and her skin had lost its former luster. Right now, Yao Tao was like a flower that had lost all its moisture. She was rapidly withering away. But the one controlling her body was still the sovereign lord's will clone. This could be determined from the unchanging chill in her eyes. Suddenly, after losing nearly all of her blood, the countless wounds on Yao Tao's body began to heal. Starting from some of the shorter and shallower wounds, they slowly began to disappear. Qin Yu's heart skipped a beat. He didn't have any evidence, but his intuition told him that these wounds were disappearing. This was Yao Tao's defeat. As expected, she had chosen to give it her all. But in the end, she hadn't been able to change the outcome. Although Qin Yu had expected this, he still couldn't help but furrow his eyebrows when this scene occurred in front of him. His face darkened. He had already explained the reason many times. He didn't want to see Yao Tao die, at least not right now. He turned to look at the sovereign lord. It was clear that the only one who could change everything was this inconceivably powerful woman. You created this mess yourself, so you can't just let it go like this, right? Otherwise, where would your face as a sovereign be? Don't look at me like that. Qin Yu, I've discovered that you don't want to learn the good things, but you learn these crooked tricks so quickly. You even know how to use your eyes to provoke me. Humph humph. But this is really too low of a level. I have seen all sorts of situations in my life. If I were so easily schemed against by others, I would have died countless times already. How could I have lived to this day? The sovereign lord sneered again and again, indicating that she had seen through everything. Her eyes seemed to say that she wouldn't fall for her tricks. Then she took a deep breath and roared, I thought you were a smart person, but how could you be so stupid? Your body, important things must be said 3 times. Don't ask me why, because I don't know either. Your body, this is the 4th time. So do you understand? It is your home field, and you are its true master. You are the one who controls everything, the one who controls it. Qin Yu's lips twitched. Sure enough, her face changed like the flipping of a book. Didn't she say that she had seen all sorts of situations in her life and that she wouldn't be easily schemed against? Soon, he discovered that he had underestimated the degree to which a sovereign's face could change. Not only could she turn her head and swallow his words, but she could swallow them even more thoroughly. Let me remind you of one more thing. The avatars of a sovereign's will are indeed strong, and the variant within your body is especially strong. But in the end, she isn't a true sovereign lord, and she doesn't even have a true physical body to rely on. So, although she seems powerful, she has no foundation at all. As long as you carefully look for her, you will definitely be able to discover her weakness. The sovereign took a deep breath and clenched her teeth. I've already said this much. If you still can't kill her, then I really will be angry. I'm warning you, when I'm angry, even I am afraid of myself. I really can do anything. After the warning, she even used threats. It seemed that after being successfully goaded into action twice in a row, she was truly annoyed. In particular, even though she knew she had been schemed against, she still couldn't help but jump in. Just thinking about this sort of feeling was truly unpleasant. He had to remember this. This was a sovereign that couldn't be goaded into action. Perhaps this label would prove useful in the future. Beneath Qin Yu's nervous gaze, after nearly half of the wounds on Yao Tao's body disappeared, she suddenly fell into a stalemate. The wounds no longer disappeared, but they also didn't recover to their original state. It was clear that the battle between Yao Tao and the sovereign's will avatar had fallen into some sort of stalemate. Qin Yu's eyes brightened. He thought back to what the sovereign had said before, rootless duckweed. The weakness of the sovereign's will avatar was already obvious. She had no source of strength to replenish herself and could only constantly consume herself. And this was also the reason why she had suppressed and killed 6 ancient true saints in an attempt to create a body. This sort of perseverance seemed as if she wouldn't make any progress. But the truth was that with every breath of time Yao Tao persisted, the scales of victory would tilt in her favor. For the first time, shock and anger appeared in her icy eyes. She seemed to have realized something unbelievable. And in truth, this was indeed unbelievable. The sovereign wasn't wrong. But if it were just these words, it would have been impossible to force the sovereign's will avatar into such a dangerous situation. There were secrets on Yao Tao's body. Qin Yu had already guessed this before. When he saw Yao Tao's memories, she had forced back the half-emperor of that race with a single finger. Now, he had only obtained another confirmation. Ha ha ha, beautifully done. I knew it. As I said, how could you possibly be so weak? The sovereign, who couldn't be goaded into action, smiled, a happy expression on his face. So, let's go all out and thoroughly defeat her. Then, you will obtain the benefits I promised you. Qin Yu rubbed his temples, a helpless look in his eyes. He discovered that his current position was far too complex. When the sovereign's will avatar wanted to kill Yao Tao, he had been worried. But now that Yao Tao had the advantage, he was also worried. The reason was simple. Once the sovereign's will avatar was killed, Yao Tao would inevitably obtain great benefits. In other words, she was already strong to begin with, and now she would become even stronger. This wasn't good news for Qin Yu, because it meant that Peach Girl would be in even greater danger. So, should he hope that Yao Tao would be killed, or should he hope that she would be able to counterattack? When Qin Yu rubbed his temples, he clearly used a bit more force, revealing some obvious marks. The sovereign suddenly glanced at him. His bright eyes made Qin Yu feel as if his thoughts had been instantly seen through. Startled, he quickly gathered his thoughts and looked up. Her lips curved up, revealing a smile that wasn't very pleasing to the eye. I said that as long as I am willing, there are no secrets in this world. As she spoke, she pointed at her head, clearly telling Qin Yu that she knew exactly what he was thinking. She actually knew. It was inevitable that he would be shocked. Just what level of strength had this woman reached? There were no secrets in this world before her. Simple to say, but if one carefully thought about it, they could feel an intense sense of horror. But since she chose to say it on her own initiative, she shouldn't have any ill intentions. Qin Yu suppressed the discomfort in his heart and bowed. I ask Senior to guide me. Why? Was she going to state a price? Qin Yu already knew that there was no free lunch in this world. He had obtained many benefits from this terrifying existence in front of him, and he was already prepared to pay the price. So at this time his expression didn't change. He bowed. Senior, please instruct me. As long as I can do it, I will do my best. The corners of her lips curved up. That familiar, carefree smile of someone who had taken revenge appeared on her face once more. Qin Yu's lips twitched. He gave her a second label. She held a grudge. Moreover, she didn't have the patience to take revenge on the spot. Smart. The sovereign snapped his fingers, a bright smile on his face. I can temporarily help you resolve this problem, but you need to go somewhere and help me obtain something. As for the specifics, I will need to prepare a bit. You will naturally find out in the future. This sort of unknown matter often meant trouble and danger. Moreover, Qin Yu's intuition told him that it wouldn't be easy to accomplish. But as he looked at the smiling sovereign, Qin Yu hesitated for a moment and then rationally suppressed any thoughts of bargaining. This was because the current situation was a typical seller's market. Facing the sovereign's request, he could only accept it. He could only hope that the sovereign wouldn't give him a mission that would send him to his death. Don't worry. I have invested a great deal in you. I won't let you die so easily. Even if you have to die, you'll have to wait until cough. In short, it won't be too difficult. It will be within the range you can handle. Qin Yu couldn't help but grimace. Although he swallowed back his words, his meaning couldn't be any clearer. Dear sovereign, even if this is what you think, can I trouble you to be a little more tactful? He took a deep breath and bowed. This junior awaits your instructions. Then he looked at her. Since the conditions had been stated, it was time for him to get down to business. The sovereign lifted a hand and pointed a finger. With light cracking sounds, the semi-sealed spherical seal rapidly fused together. Then it became a sealed space that was completely isolated from the outside world. Without any hesitation, the seal was completed. Qin Yu's lips twitched. He never thought things would turn out like this. The sovereign clapped his hands and smiled in satisfaction. I promised to spare her life and also gave her the reward she deserved. So this isn't a violation of my promise. Thinking about it, this really seemed to be the case. Cunning. This was the third label that Qin Yu had given her. Indeed, a woman's words couldn't be easily trusted, especially a beautiful woman. But Qin Yu had to admit that this could satisfy all of his requests. Yao Tao was alive. Even if she had become stronger, it was clear that it would be difficult for her to escape after being sealed away by the sovereign. Even if she could escape, she would still need a great deal of time. During this period of time, Qin Yu would be able to complete his arrangements for Peach Girl. The only thing that left him hesitant was, how did the sovereign know that Yao Tao would succeed? After all, the situation was still in a deadlock. The sovereign glanced at him and lightly said, Since I am doing this, I naturally have confidence in myself. But these are not things that you can understand. The only thing missing from his words was an obvious taunt. You are too weak right now. Even if I explain it, you won't understand. Chapter 14:15. Qin Yu bitterly smiled. It had been a long time since he had been looked down upon like this. But as he thought of the woman's terrifying strength, he could only endure it. After all, strictly speaking, being looked down upon by her wasn't too shameful. But very quickly he thought of something else. He looked at the seal that was completely sealed and said, Senior, in the Zeroth world, the Western Desolation, and that clan suffered great loss. They will definitely not give up. If they come back here again, the ruler glanced at him. Perhaps she had something else to tell Qin Yu. She waved her hand and explained, Don't worry, the channel into the broken world has been disturbed. No powerhouse will be able to descend for a short period of time. The strength of those that can force their way in is limited, and they won't be able to break the seal I laid down. She looked at the sealed sphere and smirked. Moreover, we might be able to use this to confuse them and buy more time. Qin Yu immediately reacted. If the Western Desolation and that race were to descend again and see this sealed sphere and feel its aura, their first reaction would be that it was the ruler's inheritance. Looking at the ruler and seeing the smile on her face, Qin Yu was sure that she had used some tricks to mislead the cultivators of the Western Desolation and that race. Perhaps she couldn't hide it from the peak masters of the Western Desolation and that race. But she had said that the channel into the broken world had been disturbed and powerhouses couldn't descend for the time being. This made this matter much more plausible. This simple explanation contained a great deal of information. For instance, why was Vastion called the broken world? Was it because it coexisted with the abyss? Moreover, one had to admit that the words broken world carried with them a sense of superiority that wasn't too strong. In other words, the Western Desolation was likely a complete world. There was also the matter of disturbing the channel that connected the worlds. Since it could cross an endless distance to accomplish this, it was bound to be stable and powerful. If it had the qualifications to shake the channel and forcefully stop the passage, one could feel the dread and awe that gushed out from the depths of their hearts. If a cultivator could accomplish this, just how powerful would they be? A half-emperor or even stronger? The ruler clearly knew the truth. Moreover, she seemed to be in some sort of predicament, or perhaps she was in a preparatory stage. This could be clearly seen from the fact that she was trying to buy time and the fact that she had asked Qin Yu for help. Otherwise, Qin Yu wouldn't have needed to do anything with the formidable strength displayed by this person. This was a rare opportunity. It wasn't easy for him to truly see her, so he certainly couldn't miss it. He took a deep breath and said, "Senior, there are some things that I don't understand. I hope you can give me some guidance." The Lord Ruler furrowed his brows. "My time is almost up. I'll be leaving soon. If you have any questions, it's best to be quick. Also, I can't guarantee that I'll be able to answer all of them." Qin Yu bowed. "Thank you, Senior. My first question is, where did the Western Wilds and that clan come from?" "Desolate region. Why do they call the vast young world the broken world?" "Because it was broken." Qin Yu's lips twitched. "What rank is a half-emperor powerhouse? Above ruler?" With that said, she waved her hand in annoyance. "That's all. Your cultivation isn't high enough. Knowing too much won't do any good. That's all. I'm leaving." Qin Yu loudly said, "Senior, please wait a moment. I still have one last question." He took a deep breath and stared into the Lord Ruler's eyes. "I have a friend called Teacher Liao. I wonder if Senior knows her?" The Lord Ruler turned and walked away. "I don't know her." With a single step, she vanished from sight like a shadow. What vanished along with her was the remnant aura that belonged to her in this world. Everything seemed to be erased by a giant, invisible hand, leaving no trace behind. Qin Yu bowed. "Farewell, Senior." He stood up and rubbed his temples. In truth, he had many questions in his heart, but his intuition told him that he wouldn't be able to obtain too many explanations. Thus, he could only choose the most important ones. For instance, the full name of the broken world was the Southwest Desolate Region's Broken World. Qin Yu knew this. After obtaining Teacher Liao's answer and the existence of the Western Wilds, he was able to obtain an astonishing speculation. For instance, the Western Wilds and the Southwest Wilds were both parts of the Desolate Region. But a long time ago, because of some unknown reason, a great calamity occurred. In the end, the Southwest Wild shattered, turning into the current Vast Young World and the Abyss World. And this could also explain why the Abyss and Vast Young World intersected and gave Qin Yu a familiar feeling. It was because the two came from the same source. If this was really the case, then the vastness and terror of this world far surpassed his expectations. The answer was simple. Western Wilds, Southwest Wilds. Just from their names, it wasn't difficult to judge. East, west, north, south, southwest, northwest, northeast, southeast. Could the desolate region that Teacher Liao spoke of be divided like this? The vast young world that Qin Yu resided in was only one of the desolate regions that had been formed after being shattered. Hiss! This guess left one sucking in a breath of cold air. Moreover, a half-emperor was indeed a realm above a ruler. But whether or not a ruler was a half-emperor or whether or not there were other realms, no one knew for now. In the past, the Western Wilds and that clan must have had other reasons for taking action. In addition, the female ruler here possessed an unimaginably formidable strength. Perhaps she also came from the desolate region, or perhaps it was more accurate to say that she was related to the great calamity that destroyed the Southwest Wilds. Today's World Zero was only a continuation of that great calamity's pursuit. Qin Yu couldn't help but rub his temples. He felt that the situation in front of him had become even more complex and terrifying. As the Lord Ruler said before, he had invested a great deal in him. And this sort of investment was clearly not humanitarian support that didn't ask for anything in return. However much Qin Yu received, he had to pay a corresponding price. In other words, it was inevitable that he would be drawn into this matter. He originally thought that the strength of a peak saint was at the peak of Vastyong, and besides the Lord Ruler. Well, there was a high chance that the Vastyong ruler was different from the one that just left. But he would need to verify this later. In short, Qin Yu suddenly felt that the distance between him and the peak of the mountain had become extremely far. He felt increasingly small. Although this so-called small was only relative in the desolate region, a saint was still a great figure. This could be seen from Li Yizhou's attitude. towards St. Joyen. But the existence of a higher boundary undoubtedly proved that even if a saint had the ability to protect himself, that ability was still relatively limited. Thus, his current cultivation was far from enough. Luckily, the 5 inherited supernatural abilities were a great harvest. Once he concentrated on cultivating them, his strength would definitely rise. It was just that listening to the Lord Rulers will avatar. There seemed to be hidden dangers in these things. It wasn't that Chinyu had been negligent and hadn't thought to ask just now, but that he could slowly find another opportunity in the future. In contrast, he hoped to gain a better understanding of the overall situation as soon as possible. Then, after the Great Furnace completed its transformation, it could help Chinyu refine the Great Tao, and the half-finished product had completely shattered after he had forcefully used the East Sea Sword. The only consolation in this bad news was that the Great Tao was only the icing on the cake for Chinyu. After the Great Tao shattered, he would indeed be implicated a little, but the extent was extremely limited. At most, he would spit out a few mouthfuls of blood. Of course, this could also be because the Great Tao was incomplete. If it was a complete Great Tao, the consequences would be even more severe. All of this required further verification. Finally, there was the matter of Liao Shi. The Lord Ruler's tone was firm and her actions were straightforward, directly denying Qin Yu's guess. But because she was too straightforward, he continued to have doubts. He even had an intuition that she did know the name Liao Shi. There were 2 possibilities. Liao Shi was her, an existence similar to the shadow of the abyss. Or he was the shadow of another formidable existence that she didn't have a harmonious relationship with. Unfortunately, he hadn't been able to see the Lord Ruler's appearance. Otherwise, he would have been able to come to a conclusion. Well, with the Lord Ruler's boundary, changing one's appearance should have been an extremely simple matter. So, even if he had seen her appearance, he still couldn't be certain. Qin Yu rubbed his temples again. After a moment of silence, he quickly and accurately went through everything in his mind. Then he let out a heavy sigh. He wouldn't think about it for the time being. Since he had already seen her and there was a follow-up mission, he should be able to see her again soon. The more he came into contact with her, the more useful information he would be able to find and answer the questions in his heart. He glanced at the seal that the Lord Ruler had laid down. Yao Tao was currently inside, still fighting with the Lord Rulers will avatar. Even if she could win in the end, how long could she last under the seal that isolated the world from the outside world? He had to solve the problem that Peach Girl was facing as soon as possible. But what was more important right now was to return to the Peach Garden. The Peach Garden Master had perished, and Peach Girl had lost the protection of his great Tao. She was definitely in a perilous situation. Qin Yu took a deep breath and turned to leave. He lifted his hand and grasped the air before ruthlessly tearing. Space directly shattered. He stepped inside and vanished from sight. Mystic Cave City, it was still as lively as ever. Countless cultivators came in and out every day, taking in all sorts of goods. There were countless large and small streets in the city, and there were tens of thousands of shops and merchants. Thus, even if 1 or 2 places became strange, it wouldn't be noticed for a short period of time. For instance, on the side of a long street, there was an inn that wasn't doing too well or too badly. At most, it could be considered a medium-low inn. The shopkeeper and all the workers had sincere expressions as they sent away the guests. The reason was that an honored guest had come and had spent a great deal of money to reserve the entire inn. Their reason was crude but effective. Mystic Cave City was incomparably prosperous. In addition to the strict curfew system, this caused inns to always have a booming business and their prices weren't low. To reserve the entire inn, even if it wasn't on a large scale, it wasn't something that the average person could afford. There was no need to offend some unknown great figure for such a minor matter. Of course, the most important thing was that this person had doubled the loss of rent, so they could just switch to another inn. The last guest left with a smile on his face. He waved his hand and signaled for the workers to close the door and hang up a sign indicating that the inn was full. When the shopkeeper turned around, his eyes fell on everyone. He smiled and said, "Our mission has been completed. Today, we will each go our separate ways." He lifted a hand to stop everyone from saying anything. "All right, you can all leave. Everyone must leave within an hour." Yes. Everyone bowed and returned to their rooms. Moments later, they quickly and secretly left through several secret passages in the inn. The shopkeeper let out a deep breath. After determining that he was the only one left, he arrived outside the third room. After waiting in silence for an unknown period of time, the sound of footsteps echoed in the room. Then the door opened from the inside. The shopkeeper had already heard the sounds of movement. He put down his hands that were arranging his clothes and bowed. "Respected guest, I have been waiting for you." Qin Yu had returned through the key. He sensed that besides the shopkeeper in front of him, there was no one else in the inn. He frowned and calmly said, "What are you waiting for me for?" The shopkeeper looked up, revealing a flushed face that was hard to hide. "If it isn't offensive, I would like to know from the mouth of this guest, is she really still alive?" Qin Yu remained silent. The shopkeeper knelt on the ground. "I have waited here for countless years just to confirm this matter. Even if I die, I can die without regrets." Qin Yu seriously looked at him several times. Then he let out a breath. "Yes, she is still alive." The smile on the shopkeeper's face widened. His eyes shined, and he seemed to give off an unprecedented feeling of satisfaction. But this situation only lasted for an extremely short period of time. The light in his eyes began to fade, and his smile froze into eternity. He fell to the ground, and his aura instantly converged. Then, as if his corpse had withstood the baptism of endless years, it rapidly decayed into dust. To rely on his obsession to survive, this was the first time Qin Yu had encountered such a situation. He couldn't understand it, but he also felt a bit of respect. This was why he had spoken the truth. It was also because he had already faintly sensed the situation of the shopkeeper in front of him. Qin Yu silently bowed. Without saying anything more, he turned and left the empty inn. His figure merged into the flow of people and soon vanished from sight. Chapter 14:16. While all sorts of unexpected twists and turns were happening in the world Zeroth, the vast young world was also not stable. Strange phenomena appeared one after another. Even the low-level ordinary cultivators could clearly feel the oppressive and terrifying oppressive aura. The low-level cultivators did not know the source of the strange phenomena. However, the members of the St. Tao Circle and the leaders of the forces that had connections with it were all trembling in fear. This was because this was the resonance of the heavens and earth. The fall of a peerless expert had triggered the descent of the will of the world. It was a power that interfered with reality. The strange phenomena that appeared one after another, as well as the range and degree of terror it covered, were enough to show its level. True divine. They had crossed the sea of bitterness and reached the other shore. They were truly one with the heavens and earth and were almost immortal existences. They were the most powerful cultivators below the ruler in the legends. Every move they made had the power to destroy the heavens and earth. Every true divine was a big shot in the cultivation world. They even had the ability to influence the stability of the vast young world to a certain extent. However, the strange phenomena that appeared earlier clearly told the cultivators that they had the right to know what had happened. Once, twice, thrice, the terrifying strange phenomena descended one after another without any gap. There were a total of 6 terrifying strange phenomena. After a short pause, another 2 strange phenomena descended. In other words, 8 true divines of the vast young world had fallen in an extremely short period of time due to unknown reasons. Of course, the so-called unknown reasons were only relatively speaking. Those who had the key to the world Zeroth or knew of its existence had already received the news. The 8 true divines that had suddenly fallen were most likely buried there. The matter was too big. Under the panic, the news began to spread uncontrollably. The existence of the world Zeroth had always been covered in a dense fog. Now it was as if it had been blown away by a gust of wind and was completely exposed in front of the world. The place where the ruler had fallen, the place where the various forces fought, the powerful dark world and the mysterious race, all sorts of true or false news spread at an astonishing speed. At the same time, an uncontrollable panic spread like a plague. It spread from top to bottom. The true source was the St. Tao circle that ordinary cultivators would never have the right to touch. The world was about to change. A new change had already begun. Only by withstanding the screening would one be able to survive in this change. The death of 8 true divines in a day was the beginning of this cruel and bloody change. Everyone would be drawn into it, and no one would be able to escape. Correspondingly, the stronger one was, the more difficult it was to escape the baptism of change. The proof of this was that after the death of the 8 true divines, the St. Tao Circle, the Ancient Thunder Region, and the other Holy Lands, there was an explosion. In the Heavenly Sword Sect, the Ancient Lightning Domain, and some other sacred grounds, there were a total of 6 young cultivators who had successfully broken through their limits, stepping into the bitter sea and becoming a saint. It was even to the extent that it was rumored that an ancient half-saint had successfully attained the Permethar realm. However, for the sake of stabilizing his realm and avoiding being coveted by others, he'd suppress the phenomenon that would descend upon him when he broke through. The screening had already begun. The best way to survive was to obtain more resources and increase their strength. Cultivators. It wasn't just 1 or 2 people who thought this way. Due to the general trend of events, almost everyone had the same thoughts. Chaos and turbulence inevitably descended, starting from the St. Tao Circle and spreading downwards. The entire vast young world was falling into a calamity. Zeroing. Chi Shu's face was pale. He looked at the people in front of him, half of their bodies hidden in the darkness. He gritted his teeth and said, "The Chi family has been protected by the Peach Garden for generations. If you do this, the Peach Garden will definitely be angry. Yi by divs or Zaranather choice by gods. Is Li Chi devil Shin spirits, after the yang, after the wrong by yin by yang yi. Chi. Pa!" With a snap of his fingers, the pale-faced Chi Shu froze on the spot. His widened eyes were filled with fear and disbelief. Clearly, he did not expect the other party to dare to kill him. Puff! There was a muffled sound, and his head exploded into pieces. Red and white matter splattered everywhere, and the person in the darkness turned and walked away. An icy cold voice sounded out from his mouth, shaking the air. It was like layers upon layers of undercurrents were constantly being transmitted outwards. The Chi clan refuses to cooperate. Kill without mercy. Painful screams, mournful wails, curses before death, and the smell of blood that gradually thickened in between the gasps of the mouths and noses enveloped the Chi family's residence that had been prominent for thousands of years. This great clan, with close to 10,000 direct bloodlines and countless side branches, had been completely wiped out in a single night, causing some fields of medicinal herbs to become blank. But on the second day, a new face appeared, completely taking over the Chi family. He stood on bones and blood, seizing the wealth of a great family that had been painstakingly built up for thousands of years. Everyone kept quiet out of fear, because they knew very well that this was a test for the Peach Garden, because according to the rumors, one of the 8 true saints who had fallen previously was the incomparably powerful master of the Peach Garden. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, the Peach Garden remained silent, but the silence at this moment had already revealed the answer. Countless eyes converged on them. There was shock and pity, but more than that, there was a burning desire and greed. The Peach Garden, which had lost its master, was like a table of gluttonous banquets placed in front of them. Anyone who was qualified to take a bite was eager to take action. When an alien became a saint, its strength was unparalleled, and it was recognized as the pinnacle existence of the saint realm in the Haoyang world. The strength of the yardmaster when he was alive was as great as the attraction he left behind after his death. The Peach Garden. Apart from Peach Girl, all the gathered disciples wore solemn expressions. Although the news had been confirmed for several days, there was still an unconcealable sadness in their eyes. The yardmaster had fallen. As his disciples, their breaths were connected. The moment the yardmaster's Tao disappeared, they had already sensed it. The eldest senior brother took a deep breath and said slowly, "The master is gone, but nothing must happen to the Peach Garden." He looked at Bai Feng, the only saint in the Peach Garden. Bai Feng nodded. Reporting to the eldest senior brother, "I've already sent a message and received a response." Zhou Shan gave a positive response and is on his way to the Peach Garden. He did not mention the other true saints, but everyone knew what he meant. It was understandable to protect oneself before the disaster, so no one was dissatisfied with this. Of course, after today, even if the friendship between the two sides still existed, it would be greatly reduced. But as long as there was a true saint guarding the Peach Garden, together with Bai Feng, who was at the half-saint realm, and the powerful eldest senior brother and second senior brother, the Peach Garden might be able to survive this ordeal. After confirming this, everyone's tense hearts eased a little. Xing Qiqian suddenly asked, "How is senior sister Peach Girl now?" The second senior brother said, "She's not doing particularly well. The master's matter has dealt a great blow to her. Besides, I want to know, where did the youngest junior brother go?" As he spoke, his eyes fell on Lei Xiaoyu. Lei Xiaoyu bitterly smiled. "Second senior brother, I don't know where the youngest junior brother went. But I believe that once he learns of the Peach Garden's current situation, he will rush back as fast as he can." The second senior brother took a deep breath. "I hope that the youngest junior brother can rush back as soon as possible." He stood up, a bright light bursting from the depths of his eyes. "There are some outsiders in the Peach Garden. I will go out and give them a warning, so that they know that the Peach Garden is the Peach Garden and that they are not qualified to act rashly." The eldest senior brother frowned, but in the end he didn't say anything to stop him. He watched Bai Zhanyu leave and then looked around at the crowd. The master set up a great array in the Peach Garden a long time ago. Once it's activated, even if a true saint comes, they won't be able to break through in a short period of time. He stood up, his tone calm. "So during this period of time, I plan to go into seclusion. Junior apprentice, sister Peach Girl isn't feeling well, so I will temporarily leave all matters to junior apprentice, brother Bai Feng." His lips moved as if he wanted to say something, but he was stopped by the eldest senior brother's gaze. Bai Feng bowed. "Don't worry, eldest senior brother. I will do my best to ensure that the Peach Garden isn't damaged." The eldest senior brother patted him on the shoulder and turned to walk out. Thousand-faced, gritted his teeth and turned to follow. "Now is not the best time for you to break through." Eldest senior brother was silent for a while. Then he said slowly, "Many years ago I could have broken through, but I kept waiting. Because every time I waited, I felt that I could obtain a more stable foundation, accumulate more strength, and become more powerful. But in reality, there is no end to waiting. Tomorrow is another tomorrow. I can never wait for the most suitable time." He glanced at Thousand-Faced. "When Master perished, I suddenly had an epiphany. Perhaps the moment I make up my mind to break through is the moment I have been waiting for. So you don't have to worry. I will soon break through. Even if Master and youngest junior brother aren't here, the Peach Garden will still not be in chaos." Thousand-Faced took a deep breath and stepped forward to hug him. He whispered in his ear, "I believe you. This is my response to you. As long as you can return to me safely, I will promise you." The eldest senior brother smiled. "Okay." After hugging Thousand-Faced tightly, he let go and turned to leave. He seemed to be walking slowly, but after a few steps he disappeared. Thousand-Faced raised his hand to wipe his eyes and murmured, "You must succeed, you must succeed." The eldest senior brother's situation was different from that of ordinary cultivators. Because of this, he used the name of the eldest senior brother of the peach garden and went into seclusion again and again, but he did not step into the sea of bitterness. It was not because he did not have enough foundation, but because the time was not right. As for what the time was, the yard master had never told him. When the eldest senior brother was asked, he only smiled and shook his head without saying anything. But Thousand-Faced knew that it was very dangerous. It was so dangerous that once the eldest senior brother chose to break through, especially when he was not prepared, he could die at any time. What he said before might have been reasonable, but Thousand-Faced knew that it was more of a consolation from the eldest senior brother. At this time, the second senior brother had already stepped out of the defense of the peach garden. His cold eyes swept across. "Get out now or die." Not everyone could make a clear judgment. A disciple of the peach garden who was not on the divine path was acting so arrogantly in the current situation. Rumble, the violent power between heaven and earth, boiled in an instant, condensing into a giant, godlike face. It looked down, and its deep voice rumbled like thunder. The disciples of the peach garden are all so arrogant and rude. Are you all so presumptuous in front of the divine path? The second senior brother's lips curled up slightly. He took a step forward and stomped heavily on the ground. With a deafening sound, he soared into the sky and punched out brazenly. He responded with his actions. The disciples of the peach garden could not only do this, but they could be even more presumptuous, arrogant. The thunderous roar sounded again. The giant godlike face revealed its anger, and the aura of the divine path covered everything, pressing down like Mount Tai. But soon, screams suddenly rang out. The eyes of the giant face in the sky widened, revealing fear and disbelief. Then, as if it had been sucked into a hurricane, it was instantly torn to pieces. Walala, a large amount of blood sprinkled down from the sky. It was caused by the divine path being severely injured, and it was like a rain of blood. 100 fought in the wild, did not dodge, allowing the blood to sprinkle down and stain his whole body red. His eyes were as cold as ancient ice. Within 1,000 miles of the peach garden, this is what happens to those who enter without permission. Chapter 14:17. In the endless darkness, the concepts of space and time seemed to have lost all meaning. Then, with a light cracking sound, a flame appeared from within. But what was incomparably strange was that even though this flame appeared, it could only illuminate itself. There wasn't the slightest bit of light that spread into the surrounding darkness. Illusory and distorted, a voice that seemed to come from far away came from the flame. "I need absolute secrecy. The entire process of this matter cannot be revealed." Another voice rang out directly in the darkness, as if it came from all directions. "Of course, we can guarantee this because the dead can't speak." The flame was silent for a moment. "Let me confirm one last time. He really hasn't returned?" There was a dignified tone in the voice. "We can confirm this." The voice in the darkness was calm and gentle, giving off an incomparably powerful and trustworthy feeling. "Sir, please rest assured that there will be no hidden dangers in this matter. Even if he returns afterwards, what is done cannot be undone. Those with vested interests will not allow an unstable factor to exist that threatens them. Under the current circumstances, with just a bit of guidance, we can eradicate him and bring this matter to a complete end. And, sir, you will also obtain the life extension fragment that we promised you. This is a very good deal. Relatively speaking, sir doesn't need to bear too much risk. If it weren't for the fact that your status is the most suitable, we could easily find many people willing to cooperate with you." The illusory and distorted voice sounded out from the flame. "It is best if everything goes as you say." The darkness responded, "Please rest assured." Puff! The flame extinguished, and the darkness returned to tranquility. It was like an eternal night had covered the land, and it would continue to be like this for the endless years to come. A half-saint was indeed formidable. Without a doubt, Baijianye, who could easily wound him, was even more formidable. But in the end, he wasn't a true saint. And in the current situation, unless a true saint arrived, there was no way to stabilize the peach garden that was tossed about in the turbulent waves. So after a brief period of silence, the covetous people attacked once more. And if they still dared to attack after witnessing the previous scene, their strength naturally wasn't ordinary. Those who blaspheme the holy path will be punished. A deep and dignified voice suddenly exploded between the heavens and earth. It was like a divine oracle, carrying with it a formidable will that couldn't be resisted, as if what he said was an established fact, a prophecy that would eventually come true. He said that blasphemers will lose their eyes and will no longer be able to see the world clearly. 100 battles in the wild's eyes instantly dimmed. His pupils were covered by a layer of paleness. It was as if a layer of frost had formed on the surface of clear water. He said that blasphemers will lose their arms and will never be able to touch anything again. The paleness appeared again, like some sort of marble coating. Starting from the fingertips of both hands, it quickly spread all the way up and finally covered both of his arms. He said that blasphemers will lose their feet and will never be able to stand on the earth again. A similar paleness swiftly appeared on his feet. But this time 100 battles in the wild did not continue to remain silent. He allowed it to continue spreading and depriving him. The corners of his mouth curled up into a cold and creepy smile. "Found you!" He turned around abruptly, and the paleness in his eyes disappeared. His pitch-black pupils shone, reflecting a faint, illusory figure. "Kacha! Kacha!" Shattering sounds came from his hands and feet at the same time. His paleness collapsed and dissipated. 100 battles in the wild punched out. A wild power erupted in an instant. In the empty space in front of him, a figure appeared with a muffled grunt. It was clear that he had been caught off guard and had no time to dodge, so he had to bear the majority of the strength of this punch. As blood sprayed out, it shook and shattered into a bloody fog. But it didn't fall to the ground. Instead, it emitted an ear-piercing scream. In the next moment, the bloody fog rushed out. It condensed into a tall figure with pairs of blood wings spread out behind it. Invisible blood-red flames wrapped around it, as if it were an emissary from hell. And this was the name of this strange technique. Emissary of hell. A vengeful spirit that came from hell. It had the ability to directly attack the soul. It could use the cruelest and most painful methods to tear apart an enemy's soul. It could accurately capture every soul fragment and drag them into the endless pain of hell. It was clear that Yi Yi, who had fought 100 battles, did not intend to give this messenger of hell a chance to display his true strength. As he sneered, he stomped on the ground, and a muffled sound wave suddenly rose. It felt as if his foot had landed heavily on the surface of a huge drum. The emissary of hell, which was rapidly approaching, suddenly froze. Then, cracks rapidly appeared on its body. Like a broken bubble, it disappeared with a pop sound. And the spatial tremors caused by the drum didn't disappear just like that. They continued to rush towards the phantom that had appeared like endless waves. They sucked him in, and bit by bit, forced him from an illusory state to become real. The half-saint who had revealed himself was a young man in a white robe and holding a scripture in his hand. But for a saint, one's appearance was something that could be determined with a single thought. So his youth didn't mean anything. Only the vicissitudes in his eyes showed that he was an ancient half-saint who had lived for a very, very long time. There was a trace of anger in his eyes. Clearly, he hadn't expected that he who had always been known for being strange and difficult to defend against would be forced to reveal himself by a junior who hadn't even stepped into the divine path. Moreover, he had been at a disadvantage right from the start. This was the peach garden. He had to admit that in his heart, there was indeed a trace of awe and veneration. Of course, his target wasn't Bai Zhanye in front of him. No matter how strong he was still a mortal spirit below the divine path. He would eventually decay with the passage of time. What he was in awe and veneration of was the Lord of the Peach Garden that he had never seen before. He was indeed a peak true saint, known as the strongest existence below the sovereign realm. He had taught a disciple who hadn't even stepped into the bitter sea stage, but he already possessed such terrifying power. For the geniuses of the world, it wasn't a difficult thing to do to surpass levels to battle, especially after they had received some sort of gift from their elders. But this was only limited to spiritual seeds. Stepping into the bitter sea stage and becoming a half-step saint, even if they hadn't reached the other shore, or perhaps they hadn't clearly seen the exact location of the other shore, but the level of their life had already begun to rise. They had already become divine spirit seeds. This was a completely different level of difference. To surpass such a difference, the difficulty was unimaginable. It was something that was basically impossible to accomplish. Kill! With a low roar, Bai Zhanye suddenly charged over. An icy killing intent erupted from his body, condensing to the point that it seemed to take on a physical form. The white-robed, half-step saint's heart suddenly shrank. It was only now that he could clearly see what Bai Zhanye felt: terror and despair. Of course, what was terrifying was his aura, and what was despairing was the powerful will of a half-step saint. He had a clear intuition that if he were to fight against Bai Zhanye in such a state, he would soon be killed. "Help me!" the white-robed, half-step saint roared. He suddenly opened the scripture in his hand, forcefully ripping off a page. With this action, the white-robed, half-step saint's body stiffened, a deep pain flashing in his eyes. Without the slightest hesitation, he forcefully threw out the paper. The moment it left his hand, there was a cracking sound as it shattered, leaving behind countless characters floating in the air. These were characters that he had never seen before. They seemed to be formed from some sort of symbol, a long string of characters that occasionally broke apart, but there seemed to be some sort of charm circulating within them. It was like a surging river, and the river water was filled with endless light. Hum! Hum! In the shaking, these strange characters rapidly faded away, erased by some invisible strength. At the same time, they lost their restraints on the river. Thus, the river water broke through the dike, turning into a torrent that flooded out in all directions. Endless and dazzling light erupted, as if a great sun had suddenly lit up in front of him. Then, a pure white figure emerged from the light. It had a soft and beautiful face that was difficult to distinguish between a man and a woman. Its body was nearly naked, but it didn't reveal anything that could be seen. A pair of pure white wings spread out from its back, gently flapping, releasing an ethereal aura. It was an aura that caused one to instinctively feel awe. Without needing to activate it, it opened its eyes. Within them was pure light, gentle to the extreme, as if it could wash away all sin in the world. Its eyes turned and fell onto Bai Zhanye. It lifted a hand and grasped forward. A formidable imprisoning strength descended from nothingness, acting on Bai Zhanye's body. It constantly wrapped around him like chains, temporarily trapping him where he stood. At this time, another figure appeared above Bai Zhanye's head. His entire body was shrouded in a black robe, and an invisible black fog lingered around his body. Resentment, fear, despair, destruction, and other strong negative emotions were constantly emitted from his body. From beneath the black robe, a pale hand without the slightest hint of blood appeared. It was like a cold corpse's palm. As it clenched its fist, an astonishingly large scythe phantom appeared. It quickly solidified, revealing its original color. It was a bright red color, as if it had eaten the blood of millions of people. Evil whispers, pain moans, despairing wails, crazy roars, all sorts of sounds drilled into Bai Zhanye's ears, disturbing his mind and crushing his will. His mind was corroded and covered with despair and fear. Schwa, the pale, corpse-like palm suddenly raised the blood-red scythe. Like a flash of blood-red lightning, it slashed towards Bai Zhanyu's head. At this moment, the terrifying noises suddenly became even more intense. Thump! A low and dull sound suddenly came from within Bai Zhanyu's body. It was like something that had been slumbering had been awakened by the stimulation of danger and was beating. Thump! Another sound, faster and more powerful than the previous one. Then came the third, the fourth, the fifth. His chest was shaking, and as the speed increased, the muffled thumps became heavier and heavier. It was as if there was a second heart hidden in Bai Zhanyu's chest. The tiny blood vessels on the surface of his eyes suddenly bulged. But what spread out wasn't a blood-red color, but a dazzling gold. It was like a burning flame, or like a strange mark formed by countless patterns intertwining with each other. At this moment, he gave off a terrifying feeling that he was extremely powerful, as if he could destroy everything in his path. The inherited power from the divine kingdom of destruction. How dare you use it against me? What a stupid choice. A deep voice came from Bai Zhanyu's mouth. There wasn't much emotion in his voice, but everyone could clearly feel the anger in his voice. It was filled with the smell of destruction. Bang! Amidst the deep sound, the white-winged Bai Zhanyu's hand suddenly shattered. It was as if it had been hit by a terrifying force and was sent flying. As he tumbled, his handsome face revealed an expression of pain and struggle. On his pure and flawless face, patterns that emitted a depraved and decaying aura appeared. 2 slender spiral horns drilled out of his forehead. At the same time, the white-winged Bai Zhanyu's back seemed to have suffered the most terrifying stain in the world. They quickly turned pitch black, and black flames of nothingness appeared. The flames gradually spread and engulfed him, burning him to ashes in an instant. The blood-red scythe that was slashing toward Bai Zhanyu suddenly seemed to be corroded by the river of time. The blood-red surface of the scythe quickly darkened and shriveled, like a flower that had lost its moisture. Then it began to rot. From the tip of the scythe, it quickly spread upward. Large patches of rust were mottled, giving off a strong aura of death and destruction. A painful groan came from under the black robe. The pale palm released in time, but it clearly couldn't block the power of death that was spreading from the scythe. His flesh and blood rapidly decayed, turning into sticky pus that dripped down. The exposed bones quickly turned jet black, as if they had been corroded by the dark night. The white-robed sage-to-be's mouth and nose were bleeding, and his eyes were filled with fear. He and the man under the black robe, whose body was rotting, turned around and fled. They didn't dare to stay any longer. An awakened deity from the divine kingdom of destruction. The peach garden can indeed bring surprises. A low and calm voice suddenly rang out in the world. Some invisible but extremely vast power descended and enveloped 100 battles in the wild, whose body was covered in gold runes. It had already regarded him as its spoils of war. Chapter 1418. Finally, a true saint powerhouse couldn't help but make a move. 100 battles Yuye's exposed flesh erupted with golden lines, becoming increasingly dazzling. Dull and violent collisions erupted from the void. This was him trying to break through the suppressive strength outside his body. If you were in your peak state, you might be able to contend with me. But now that you have not fully recovered, you are no match for me. Without warning, a figure appeared in their line of sight. The void around him trembled, forming a curtain that blocked everyone's vision. All eyes that gathered around him could only see an illusory figure. But without exception, all eyes were filled with awe and fear. A ruler hid from the world, and a true saint was at the peak of Vastyong. They rarely appeared, but their attacks could cause the world to tremble. Today, with the peach garden as a trigger, a peak of this realm had arrived. Schwa! A figure flashed out from the defense of the peach garden. It was Bai Feng, the only saint in the peach garden. He cupped his hands together and bowed. Bai Feng greets the true saint. In the shaking void, the true saint's voice was calm. Do you want to save him? Bai Feng shook his head. No, I came here to greet an old friend of my master. He bowed and said, Welcome, great Zhou Saint. Another figure appeared next to Bai Zhanyue. Similarly, the void trembled, and his surroundings became blurry. He lifted a hand, and with a pop, the suppressive strength that enveloped him suddenly disappeared. Great Zhou Saint's voice was calm. I once owed the garden master a favor. I asked Saint Lin to give me some face. The scope of the divine Tao circle was limited, and there were very few true saints, besides a few who lived in seclusion. Even if they didn't know each other, they had met several times. It wasn't difficult to know each other's identities. Saint Lin frowned. Great Zhou Saint wishes to protect the peach garden with a single strike? Great Zhou Saint lightly said, At least today I will not sit idly by. In other words, they could discuss this in the future. After several breaths of time, the air was quiet. Saint Lin turned and left. 3 days from now, I will return to the peach garden. I hope that great Zhou Saint will not stop me. Shua! With a step, the saint disappeared without a trace. The terrifying aura that enveloped the peach garden suddenly dissipated, giving everyone room to breathe. Bai Feng bowed and said, Thank you for your help, sage. On the surface of Bai Zhanyuye's body, large patches of golden patterns disappeared. His face was pale and he was panting heavily. Thank you, sage. Zhou Xing nodded. Let's talk after we enter the peach orchard. A hint of hesitation flashed in Bai Feng's eyes, but it quickly disappeared. She raised her hand and gestured. Saint Zhou, please come with me. Shua! The 3 of them flew into the barrier of the peach blossom garden. As far as the eye could see, countless peach trees were blooming luxuriantly. Not much had changed because of the death of the yard master. At this moment, there seemed to be a soundless gale howling above his head, sweeping up the billions of petals and forming a wall of petals that completely covered the sky. This was the barrier of the peach orchard that the 3 of them had just passed through. It was the result of years of preparation by the owner of the orchard, and its power was extremely terrifying. Zhou Saint's eyes focused, and then he showed a look of admiration. As expected of the yard master, her cultivation is indeed profound and her strength is extremely powerful. She could actually build such an amazing defense barrier. Even if a true saint were to come personally, it would be difficult for him to do anything in a short time. Bai Feng smiled. If Master could hear what Zhou Saint said right now, he would be extremely gratified. This barrier of the peach orchard is indeed one of the efforts of his life. It can ensure the safety of the peach orchard inside and outside. Bai Zhanyuye's pupils shrank slightly. He sensed a trace of abnormality in these words. Zhou Saint was silent for a moment, and then he said slowly, In this situation, it is understandable that you are cautious. Considering your friendship with the yard master, I can pretend that this test didn't happen, but it better not happen again. After saying this, he turned around and left. I will stand guard outside the peach orchard. No one will offend me for 5 days. Shua! Zhou Saint's figure disappeared inside the barrier. Bai Feng's face stiffened slightly, and a bitter smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. Second brother, I am afraid that I have the heart of a villain. Zhou Saint is only willing to protect the peach orchard for 5 days. Bai Zhanyu, he shook his head. You are not wrong. Moreover, Zhou Saint has already said that he can understand what you are doing now. Bai Feng took a deep breath. Eldest brother is in seclusion to seek a breakthrough. I will go find Senior Zhou Xin now and kowtow to apologize to him. I will ask him to stay for a few more days. He turned around and chased after her, but soon came back with a helpless expression. Senior Zhou Saint is not willing to see me. He is not moved by what I said. Bai Yi took a deep breath. 5 days it is. Perhaps this is Zhou Saint's limit. He is just saying it. In the end, you and I can only rely on ourselves. But 5 days! Eldest brother has been lingering on the threshold for countless years. He can take that step at any time. 5 days is enough. There was another part that, Bai Zhanyu, you did not say. If 5 days were not enough, any more time would be meaningless. Bai Feng seemed to understand. She took a deep breath and said, For many years, I have been taking care of the barrier of the peach orchard. I am most familiar with it. Now, I am also the only saint in the peach orchard. I can fully activate its power. So as long as I am alive, I will not allow anyone to come in and disturb eldest brother's breakthrough. He bowed and left quickly. Countless peach blossoms tumbled and danced in the air. Soon he disappeared. Bai Yi coughed and raised his hand to cover his mouth. When he finally calmed down, his palm was already dark red. His power had not fully recovered. Forcibly using the limit of his realm had caused him a great backlash. But this was something he had to do. He had to let all those who coveted the peach orchard know that the disciples of the peach orchard still had the courage and the power to resist. Anyone with ill intentions would be met with their counterattack. Zhou Saint had promised to do it in 5 days. With his status, he should be able to do it. He hoped that everything went well for eldest brother. Also, he hoped that youngest brother would come back as soon as possible. Only by having a true saint could they truly stabilize the situation in the peach orchard. Otherwise, everything else would only slow down the deterioration of the situation and would not help the final result. And in this matter, he was doomed to be powerless. This made the proud and combative Bai Zhanyu find it hard to accept. He smiled bitterly, but soon he adjusted his mood and walked deeper into the peach orchard. When he was helping his teacher clean up the wine cellar, he inadvertently made another discovery. He had already reported this matter to his teacher, and his teacher had told him to deal with it himself. Could it be that he had already guessed that this day would come? As his thoughts raced, a trace of determination appeared in the depths of Bai Zhanyu's eyes. If something unexpected really happened, then even if he had to risk his life, he would protect his junior brothers and sisters of the peach orchard. He would give Peach Orchard a chance to recover and turn the situation around. With obsession in his heart, his steps became more steady and solemn. Accompanied by a series of coughs, the Peach Orchard's second senior brother disappeared into the depths of the peach blossoms. This direction led to the Peach Orchard's wine cellar. For countless years, it had devoured billions of peach blossoms and produced a steady stream of wine. However, no one unrelated to the peach orchard was allowed to approach it. The only people who had ever entered were the yard master, eldest brother, and second brother. Something had happened in the peach orchard. Not long after leaving Shantong City, Qin Yu learned of this news. As the heavens shook, the secrets of the St. Dao Circle inevitably spread through all kinds of secret channels. The 8 saints had perished, the catastrophe had begun, and the world had changed. All cultivators were like fish in a vast river. Only by experiencing the baptism of the great catastrophe would they have the qualifications to survive. Otherwise, they would eventually turn into ashes. Qin Yu had heard the yard master mention something similar. He had personally experienced the 3 Saint Dao catastrophes, and they were also the shuffling and replacement of Vastyong. On that day, Qin Yu and even the yard master had never imagined that when the 4th catastrophe arrived, they would all be caught up in it. One would perish and the other would rise, and the peach orchard would become an eye-catching and dangerous whirlpool in this rushing river. Boom! He punched out, and the space in front of him shattered. Boundless darkness filled the space. Qin Yu took a step forward and entered the void outside. He frowned and his eyes were cold. He didn't have the slightest thought of retreat or fear. He was rushing back to the peach orchard as fast as he could. Wait for me. In the familiar darkness, the flame appeared again. But this time, before it could make a sound, the darkness had already responded. Your Excellency, you have violated the agreement between you and me. Please give us a reasonable explanation. Otherwise, we will regard it as a betrayal. The darkness was silent, but it seemed to hide countless horrors. It was as if a giant mouth could appear at any time and swallow everything. The voice in the flame sounded still ethereal and ethereal. An accident has occurred in your plan. I can only deal with it randomly. The darkness was silent for a moment. Please explain in detail. The voice of the flame said, the power of the peach orchard barrier is far stronger than what your information said. No, it is much stronger. It is not only in terms of defense, but also has an astonishing offensive ability. I have personally sensed this, and I can guarantee it. If we follow the original plan and face the peach orchard barrier's counterattack, I am not confident that I can protect myself, and I can't be sure that the subsequent events will proceed according to our previous expectations. The darkness was silent for a long time, as if trying to determine whether what he said was true or false. We will verify this. If it is true, then it is indeed our negligence. But the great existence in the darkness tells me that Your Excellency is still hiding something. A light cough came from the flame, and the voice became more and more serious. Yes, there is another reason that made me change my plan. In the peach orchard, someone is trying to make a breakthrough. The voice in the darkness was full of surprise. True saint. Yes, although the aura is very obscure and has been carefully concealed, I happen to be more sensitive to changes in aura. You can also confirm this. If there is no accident, the person who is making a breakthrough is the first disciple of the peach orchard. Thank you for your frankness, Your Excellency. Your actions will resolve many unnecessary misunderstandings between us. Please wait patiently, Your Excellency. We will soon get an answer. The darkness quieted down. Only the flame that could only illuminate itself burned quietly in the silence. Thank you for your patience. We express our apologies for our previous negligence, and we are willing to pay you an additional 10% as a token of our gratitude. Very evidently, in a short period of time, they had already confirmed the truth of everything. Just this point alone was enough to show that behind the voice in the darkness, there was an extremely powerful force. The flame responded. Yes, then now, we need to discuss the follow-up plan again. Also, I need to confirm again, has he returned to the peach orchard? The voice in the darkness said, please do not worry about this, Your Excellency. The great existence in the darkness has always been watching the peach orchard. As long as he appears before he nears the peach orchard, we will discover him in advance. The flame said, I hope that this time you will not make a mistake again. Of course, we promise, Your Excellency. The thousand-faced assassin stood guard outside the eldest senior brother's seclusion. She had changed her face again. She was beautiful and alluring, like a blooming peony. At this moment, her brows were slightly furrowed. Her gaze fell on the courtyard in front of her, revealing an unconcealable worry. Because of her cultivation method, she could pass through the seal and vaguely sense a little of the changes in the chi within the courtyard. The eldest senior brother had already successfully taken a step into the sea of bitterness. If his goal was only this, he could have already broken out of seclusion. But it was very clear that the eldest senior brother's goal was not only limited to the level of semi-saint. His goal was to break through 2 realms, reach the other shore, and achieve the peak of true divine. Whether this situation had ever happened before, the thousand-faced assassin could not be sure, but as far as she knew, there was no precedent of success. And the eldest senior brother had already been frozen for a long time, unable to take another step. As time passed, this was obviously not good news. Chapter 1419. In the grand and dark hall, the air was full of obscurity, like some kind of invisible liquid, emitting a cold aura. A round platform stood in the center of the hall, its edges unmarked. as if it was a part of the hall itself. Now, two figures in black robes stood opposite each other on the round platform, each with their hands forward, a crescent-shaped object floating between their fingers. One of them suddenly said, "Dusk." After a few moments, the other person said, "Order." Hum on the surface of the crescent-shaped object. Blood stains suddenly appeared, spreading rapidly and finally covering it entirely. Thousand Face's expression suddenly changed. She sensed that the eldest brother's aura suddenly became chaotic and disorderly, showing signs of losing control. She hurried forward a few steps, but before she could get close to the eldest brother's courtyard, she was pushed away by an invisible force, unable to get close. It was not impossible to break through, but it would undoubtedly aggravate the danger that the eldest brother was now facing. Taking a deep breath and suppressing the panic in her heart, Thousand Face turned around and screamed, "Eldest brother is in trouble!" Soon, except for Bai Feng, who maintained the barrier, all the disciples of the Peach Garden gathered in the courtyard. Without exception, all attempts to get close to the courtyard were rejected by the isolation force. The second brother's expression was solemn. He vaguely knew some secrets about the eldest brother, and because of this he knew what kind of danger he was in now. Breaking through 2 realms in a row. If he failed, there was no way out. Taking a deep breath, he said in a low voice, "You stay here, I will immediately go to Zhousheng. Now, only he can help the eldest brother break through." Swoosh, the second brother turned and left, rushing out of the Peach Garden as fast as he could to find Zhousheng. With a thought, the space suddenly twisted, sealing off the area where the two were. He looked up at Zhousheng, frowning slightly, and bowed. "This is an emergency. Please forgive me for my offense, Zhousheng." Zhousheng said, "What is it?" The second brother took a deep breath. The eldest brother is breaking through in seclusion, and his aura suddenly became chaotic and out of control. Please help. Zhousheng frowned at first, then seemed to think of something, and his brows suddenly furrowed. Breaking through 2 realms in a row. Seeing the second brother nod, he growled, "Nonsense!" He suddenly got up. "Take me there immediately." The second brother was slightly relieved. "Thank you, Sir Zhousheng. Please come with me." Perhaps they had really thought too much before, but fortunately, Zhousheng did not mind. "Wait." Zhousheng lifted his hand and touched his brow. His body glowed, and an almost transparent shadow walked out. The shadow quickly solidified when it came into contact with the air, and it looked exactly like Zhousheng. Second brother had a look of realization. Zhousheng was worried that someone would attack the Peach Garden after he left, so he intentionally left a clone behind. "Let's go." Swish, the 2 of them flew through the barrier of the Peach Blossom Garden and entered the Peach Blossom Garden. Without any hesitation, they followed Yu Yi of the 100 Battles and headed straight for the eldest brother's courtyard. The 1,000-faced assassin, Lei Xiaoyu, and the others who were guarding outside quickly bowed. "Greetings, Saint Zhou." Zhousheng nodded with a solemn face. His eyes fell on the small courtyard, and his expression became even more solemn. "There's a problem with the breakthrough. I don't have absolute confidence, but I can only try my best." His eyes swept across the crowd. "Next, I will enter and try to help him save the situation, but the final result cannot be guaranteed. Also, no matter what you feel later on, do not barge in. A clash between true sages is not something you have the right to interfere with." The 1,000-faced assassin opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but in the end he didn't say anything. Yu Yi of the 100 Battles said in a low voice, "We understand. Sir Zhousheng, please make your move immediately." Zhousheng turned and walked towards the small courtyard. Strong winds rose without any wind, swirling around his robes and making them stick to his body. It was clear that he had also encountered an invisible force that repelled him. Zhousheng frowned and pointed forward. There was a muffled sound, and the blocking force instantly disappeared. He took a step forward, and the courtyard doors opened and closed in the next moment, cutting off everyone's line of sight. Second brother said, Zhou Sheng has been master's friend for many years, and he is still willing to help the peach blossom garden in today's situation. He is trustworthy enough. With his help, eldest brother will definitely be safe. After saying this, he looked at the thousand-faced assassin in silence. Seventh sister, you have just recovered from your injuries. You should not have too many emotional fluctuations. The thousand-faced assassin said, Thank you for the reminder, second brother. As she spoke, her eyes were still on the small courtyard. Second brother sighed inwardly, but he did not say anything. Everyone fell silent. If the eldest brother could successfully break through, the crisis of the peach blossom garden would naturally disappear. But youngest brother was also missing, and there had been no news of him. Could it be that this was the fate of the peach blossom garden? With the fall of Master, it would also usher in an irreversible destruction? The moment the courtyard doors closed, Zhou Sheng looked up at the peach tree in the courtyard. At this moment, all its leaves and flowers had withered and appeared to be contaminated with blood. It emitted a breath that made one's heart palpitate and tumble. Your Excellency, Zhou Sheng. In the room, the eldest brother's voice sounded. Although weak, it was still calm. Zhou Sheng grunted. Gao Zhuang, how is your current state? The eldest brother was silent for a moment and said, Thank you for your concern, Saint. There was some deviation when I broke through, but it was still within control. Also, you should know that I don't really like this name, so you can call me Xiao Gao. The corner of Zhou Sheng's mouth twitched. You still have the mood to joke now? It seems that your state is indeed still under control. But to break through 2 realms and reach the Nirvana realm is something that has never happened since ancient times. It is too dangerous for you to do so rashly. He stepped forward. I have studied the backfire of breaking through, and I should be able to help you stabilize the chaotic power in your body. The eldest brother said, There is no need to trouble Saint Zhou. I can deal with it myself. Zhou Sheng stopped. Perhaps you can indeed deal with it, but there is not enough time for you now. The situation in the peach garden is extremely dangerous, and an uncontrollable accident could happen at any time. He frowned. Or do you not trust me? The saint is still willing to help the peach garden in such a dangerous situation. How could I be disrespectful? Then I will have to trouble Saint Zhou. The door opened by itself, and Zhou Sheng saw Gao Zhuang sitting at the round table behind the door. His face was pale, and he nodded with a smile. He stepped into the room and frowned. He raised his hand and placed it on the eldest brother. I will temporarily give up control of my own power and hand it over to you. After all, you know the condition of your own body best. The eldest brother nodded. Thank you, Saint Zhou. Majestic and gentle power was infused into the eldest brother's body. It was extremely docile and completely obeyed his will. With the help of Zhou Sheng's power, the eldest brother quickly stabilized the condition of his body. His pale face slowly regained some color. The foreign power that had invaded his body was quickly purged. The eldest brother secretly frowned. Perhaps he had thought of the wrong target, and the source of the danger was not Zhou Sheng. Who was the one who had done it? The sense of danger had not been resolved. Even though the power of the pollution was being purged and was quickly fading, it made him feel even more uneasy. This meant that the danger was not completely over. It did not matter. With Zhou Sheng's help, the power of the pollution would soon be purged. When that time came, he would take the last step and step into the Nirvana realm and become a true saint. Even if there was still danger then, he was confident that he could protect the peach garden while the sovereign was in seclusion. Focus! Zhou Sheng growled behind him. The eldest brother took a deep breath and closed his eyes, doing all he could to purge the foreign power of the pollution from his body. With all his might, he quickly reached the end. Finally, the last of the power of the pollution was purged from his body. The eldest brother grunted and opened his mouth to spit out a sticky blood clot. It fell to the ground, accompanied by green smoke and a violent corroding sound. He opened his eyes and looked relieved. "Thank you, Saint." The eldest brother grunted, and his face turned pale before he could finish his sentence. Zhou Sheng's palm that landed on him was like a sharp blade, cutting through his flesh and sinking deep into his body. Dong Dong Gao, Zhuang's heart started beating uncontrollably. Along with it, the power that surged into Gao Zhuang's body went out of control. They were no longer docile and gentle like before. They were like venomous snakes that had just woken up from hibernation, baring their ferocious fangs. At the same time, countless cold tentacles emerged from the body of the venomous snake, spreading out like a spider web. Because Zhou Sheng had secretly spread his power throughout his body in order to purge the foreign power of the pollution, it only took an instant for the eldest brother to be completely controlled. Gulp, gulp. The sound of swallowing, which was not rapid but filled with endless greed, rang clearly in his ears. The eldest brother could feel that he was being devoured. As for who was doing all this, there was no need to say. He laughed bitterly and said, "Why are you doing this, Saint?" The swallowing did not stop. Zhou Sheng's calm voice sounded, "Because I do not want to share it with others, and the power of a newly ascended true Saint is enough to help me break through my current level." Black flames burned quietly in the depths of his eyes. The aura of coldness, desolation, and death continued to emanate from his body. With the two of them as the center, ice quietly condensed. The white frost spread and covered everything. A cultivator of the way of ghosts. If Qinyu was here, he would be able to recognize at a glance that what Zhou Sheng was releasing was a terrifying aura that belonged to the way of ghosts. It was different from the Avicii Saint, but it was just as strange and terrifying. Gao Zhuang closed his eyes and opened them again. There were still traces of pain in them, but there was more coldness. Strictly speaking, I am now at the level of a true saint. Do you have absolute confidence that you can completely devour me? Zhou Sheng laughed softly, revealing his strong confidence. Of course, since I have already made my move, I will not give you the slightest chance to resist. Give up. When I devour you, I will announce to the public that you have failed to break through, and you will end up with your body and soul destroyed. And in return, I promise you that I will protect the peach garden through this crisis. Of course, you can also try to resist, but this means that you have rejected my good intentions. As revenge, I will kill everyone in the peach garden. You have already experienced the power that I have, as well as my powerful concealment ability. As long as I am willing, no one in the peach garden will be able to escape. For example, 7,000 lines. The eldest brother's pupils shrank slightly and he frowned. His eyes were filled with emotions, and his body became more and more tense. I don't believe you. Zhou Sheng laughed softly. I am willing to swear by the great path that, as long as you do not resist, all the promises that I have made before will take effect immediately. There was a moment of silence. Only the sound of gulping could be heard, echoing in the room that was already covered in frost. The eldest brother spoke with difficulty. All right. He closed his eyes, hiding the scarlet that appeared in the depths of his eyes. A terrifying chill was released from the courtyard, and everything within its range was covered in ice. In the extreme cold, there was a breath that made one's heart palpitate and fear. That was the smell of death. Thousand Faces' expression changed. She closed her eyes and focused her senses, but all her power of perception was blocked out by a terrifying chill. Something has happened to the master. Before she could say anything, 100 Battles in the Wild's eyes suddenly turned blood red, and a violent power broke out of his body. He stared at the small courtyard, as if he could see through all obstacles, and saw the eldest brother, who was still Zhou Sheng, who was almost glued to him. Ghost Path. The 2 words were cold, and 100 Battles in the Wild did not hesitate. He took a heavy step forward, and raised his hand to blast forward. Boom! Countless pieces of ice were shattered, and the closed door of the courtyard shook violently, but it was not blasted open. Third brother, 100 battles in the wild roared. Rumble. The barrier of the peach garden moved, and countless peach blossoms fell, as if it was raining peach blossoms. Chapter 1420. Every peach blossom that fell had an indescribably terrifying impact that heavily bombarded the courtyard that was covered in frost. The sounds of shattering filled the air. The icy strength that filled the air was forcefully torn apart. Within the room, Zhou Sheng, who was wrapped around the eldest senior brother, roared, "How dare you lie to me?" Shua, the eldest senior brother, opened his eyes, his voice cold and indifferent. "I don't believe in demons." The blood-red color in his eyes grew thicker, like viscous blood. He opened his mouth and screamed soundlessly. During this process, his hair flew up in a manner that defied all common sense. Each strand turned the color of blood and emitted a thick, bloody light. Thump! Thump! The devouring continued. But at this time, a blood-red grid appeared in the air. It appeared from within the eldest senior brother's body and slowly spread towards Zhou Sheng. Humph! It's useless. In the end, you still don't understand the strength of a true saint of the ghost path. Zhou Sheng's low voice revealed a cruel will. Outside the barrier, the avatar that Zhou Sheng had left behind seemed to sense something. It turned and looked towards the peach garden. In the next moment, without hesitation, it stomped down and held out. During this process, the avatar rapidly turned illusory. Like a shadow, it crashed into the peach garden's barrier. There was no loud collision sound as expected. Without a sound, the light and shadow directly entered the barrier, leaving a large transparent hole on it. At the edges, there were slowly wriggling traces of melting, as if it had withstood some kind of extremely high temperature. Mixed with spots of yellow and dull colors, it gave off a feeling of coldness and desolation. In the silver-white sealed space, Bai Feng floated in the air. Countless phantoms wove together like a tide, constantly surging around him. When the peach garden's barrier was broken, a black suddenly appeared in the silver-white sealed space. Bai Feng opened his eyes and spat out a mouthful of blood. A dark red color spread out from his chest. His robes and flesh mysteriously disappeared, forming a horrifying bloody hole in his chest. The surging phantoms around him froze, as if a key part of a precise instrument had been damaged. Taking a deep breath, Bai Feng ignored the wound on his chest. He mobilized the power of the peach garden's barrier to repair the damage. But at this time his complexion changed. Outside the peach garden, Lin Sheng, who had retreated, suddenly appeared. He looked at the barrier of the peach garden and saw the hole that had been broken. This saint did not care about his identity at all and attacked at this moment. The heavens and earth are vast and boundless. Star fragments soar through the heavens. Today, obey my will and destroy all obstacles before you. This is Starfall. Lin Sheng lifted his hand and pointed forward. In the next moment, dots of scarlet suddenly appeared in the sky above his head. Following closely behind was a terrifying rumbling roar, carrying with it an unparalleled speed and a ruthlessness that could destroy everything. The crimson color in the sky quickly expanded, as if a flame was burning, dyeing the entire sky red. Therefore, in the next moment, it really began to burn. The blazing, scorching flames surged violently under the sky. The meteor spat out flames, dragging a long tail behind it. Like an arrow shot from the throne of the 9 heavens by a god, it headed straight for the peach garden. Its target was the hole on the barrier that had been destroyed by the clones around it. Bang, bang, bang. Earth-shattering explosions erupted one after another, accompanied by blazing flames that rose into the sky and terrifying waves of air that rolled and vibrated. It instantly attracted the attention of countless people outside the peach blossom garden. They could not help but slightly widen their eyes, revealing fear and awe. This was the strength that a true saint could erupt with. It was infinitely close to that of a legendary spiritual god. The entire peach garden barrier violently shook, falling into flames and destruction. Cracks rapidly spread outwards with the hole as the center. The silver space was instantly covered with cracks. It was clear that it had an extremely close relationship with its controller. Thus, on the surface of Bai Feng's body, countless wounds rapidly appeared on his chest and recklessly spread outwards. Massive amounts of blood gushed out. His complexion paled, and unsuppressible pain gushed out from his eyes. His breathing was rapid and labored. In the end, he was only a half-step saint, and he had just broken through not too long ago. It wasn't enough for him to display the full strength of the peach garden barrier. But Bai Feng was lucky enough. If it weren't for the protection of the peach garden barrier, he would have perished in the face of a true saint's all-out attack. But even if he didn't die, he was temporarily unable to continue controlling the peach garden barrier. Eldest senior apprentice, brother's courtyard. The courtyard walls were forcefully pushed down, revealing the peach tree that was intimately connected to eldest senior apprentice brother. Seeing its withered branches and leaves and signs of serious contamination, it was clear that all of this had been a conspiracy from the start. A heaven-shaking explosion spread out, shaking the entire peach garden. The peach blossoms that sprinkled down from the sky rapidly disintegrated into powder. There was a powerful enemy invading from the outside. Bai Feng had been severely wounded. Kacha! Kacha! Giant cracks appeared in the sky above everyone's heads, like the gaping maws of a monster. These cracks represented destruction and slaughter, able to swallow all. This was a sign that the peach garden barrier was on the verge of collapse. A deep, cold, and evil voice sounded out from the room. This is the unavoidable end of the peach garden, and all of you will follow it into complete destruction. Bang! A wild strength erupted. After withstanding the continuous bombardment, the house that was on the verge of collapse collapsed, revealing everything within. Eldest senior apprentice brother had blood-red eyes, blood-red hair, and a net of blood wove around him, nearly wrapping around him. But now he revealed a pained expression, and blood seeped out from every orifice of his head. His body shivered, and the net of blood that wove around him began to dim. Behind him, Zhou Sheng, who was almost sticking to him, curled his lips into a cold smile. I have to admit that I underestimated you. You did have a chance to escape, but you were too hasty. I just purposely revealed an opening. Now, nothing can be changed. 100 battles in the wild roared out loud. Gold runes rapidly appeared on the surface of his body. At the same time, his body rapidly expanded, growing to 1,000 feet in the blink of an eye. An ancient, dignified, and powerful aura erupted from his body. Blood, red, and gold wove together in his eyes, revealing a chaotic and horrifying aura. It gave off a horrifying feeling. His feet slammed into the ground, and he punched out. A golden river suddenly appeared, rushing towards Zhou Sheng. In the end, the so-called revived divine spirits are nothing but a bunch of pitiful worms abandoned by time and the world. I don't know what you are borrowing from, but you are able to erupt with nearly peak strength for a short period of time. But this is still not enough to contend with me. Zhou Sheng, who was shrouded in ghostly qi, raised his hand and punched out. A terrifying phantom of white bones instantly condensed, turning into a giant white bone arm. It struck out heavily, colliding with the golden river. Almost in an instant, the entire river was snapped in half. It was clear that Zhou Sheng, who had swallowed a portion of his eldest senior brother's strength, had become even more terrifying. The 1,000-faced assassin screamed. Mist suddenly filled her body, and countless phantom images appeared on her blurry face. Each of these phantoms was an extremely beautiful woman's face. They flashed and reappeared quickly, and there seemed to be no end to them. She grabbed at the mist and tore it apart. Her body trembled as if she was enduring intense pain. A mass of mist was cut off by her, and she threw it at Zhou Sheng. It exploded in midair, turning into the face of a beautiful woman. Her watery eyes stared at Zhou Sheng, and a charming smile appeared on her lips. She exuded a breathtakingly seductive aura. Zhou Sheng's eyes that burned with black flames froze for a moment. But in the next moment, he had already broken free from the power that was restricting his soul. He diabolically grinned. He opened his mouth and sucked in a deep breath. A mutated, resentful spirit? It's similar to a curse. Haha. The disciples of the Peach Garden are truly extraordinary. The eyes of the beautiful woman formed by the mist suddenly widened, as if she had discovered something extremely horrifying. Her beautiful face paled. She screamed and tried to escape, but she couldn't control herself at all. She flew into Zhou Sheng's mouth. Her screams came to an abrupt end. The mist around the thousand-faced assassin shattered with a loud bang, like popping bubble. Her pitiful appearance was revealed. All of her naked flesh seemed to have been corroded by a strong acid. Her bright red flesh and blood flowed down its surface, flowing with mucus. But soon, as her flesh and blood wriggled about, all of her terrifying wounds rapidly healed. What appeared in front of everyone was another beautiful face. Her skin was as white as snow and seemed as if it could be broken by the slightest breeze. Her skin was as white as snow and seemed as if it could be broken by the slightest breeze. Compared to the horrifying scene just now, it formed a sharp contrast. Shua, the thousand-faced assassin, opened her eyes. She stood up as if she hadn't been seriously injured, but the feeling she gave off had changed. She was colder and more distant. It was like when the mist was swallowed by Zhou Sheng. She had lost something extremely important to her. Save eldest senior apprentice brother, the 5-elemental Iron Mountain, the 6-elemental Earth, and Lei Xiaoyu didn't hesitate to attack the true saint, but their strength was far too weak. Before they could even touch Zhou Sheng, they were annihilated by the invisible aura around him. White Phoenix had been severely wounded when the barrier of the Peach Garden was broken. Second senior apprentice brother was unable to cause any damage, and the thousand-faced assassin had suffered unknown injuries. As for the others, none of them were able to help. The people of the Peach Garden had fallen into a desperate situation. At this time, there was a sudden cough, followed by the faint sound of footsteps. This sound should have been completely covered up, but for some reason, it was clearly transmitted into everyone's ears. The figure of the Peach Garden appeared not too far away. Her complexion was pale to the extreme, even seeming transparent. She was like a thin layer of ice that was rapidly melting as the temperature rose. Perhaps in 2 hours, perhaps in an hour, or perhaps in the next moment, she would vanish forever. Zhou Sheng's eyes fell on her. His pupils shrank, and he lifted his hand. Die. This was the translation of information that Zhou Sheng received. In truth, what came out of his mouth was a series of complex and strange syllables. This wasn't the language of the living, but a voice from the world of death, one that signified the ultimate destruction. Peach Girl's eyes were calm and indifferent, without the least bit of emotion. It was as if she hadn't even noticed the arrival of the true saint's finger of death. Between coughs, she said in a soft voice, Second senior apprentice brother, 100 battles in the wilds, 1,000-foot tall body, stood in front of Peach Girl like a golden mountain. Rich golden light shot into the heavens. Bang! The golden light fiercely caved in, as if it had withstood the impact of some terrifying strength. At the same time, where the two sides came into contact, there was the sound of intense corrosion. Thick black smoke rose up, and the golden light rapidly dimmed. On the surface of 100 battles in the wild's body, his flesh and blood began to show signs of drying up. His color turned gray, as if he had lost all vitality. But his body still stood firmly on the ground, not moving at all as he blocked the full might of the finger of death. Peach Girl raised her hand and touched the space between her eyebrows. A halo appeared, and her almost transparent face suddenly became even paler. Her whole person was like a shadow, and it became more and more faint. She pushed forward. The moment the halo left her palm, it instantly burst into endless light, and a powerful aura shot up into the sky. The shadow of a sky-supporting peach tree emerged in the light, and the eyes of all the disciples of the peach garden suddenly lit up. This was the aura of the great path of the yard master. A figure appeared in the shadow of the sky-supporting peach tree. Although it was extremely blurry, the disciples of the peach garden could still recognize it at a glance. It was the yard master. However, the eyes of the figure were chaotic and vacant, and it was obvious that it didn't have its own consciousness. A trace of pain appeared in Peach Girl's eyes, but it soon disappeared. She said softly, "Father, please help eldest senior brother out of danger." The yard master suddenly moved. He raised his hand and clenched it. The peach garden's barrier above his head, which had been violently shattered, was instantly restored to its original state. At the same time, a terrifying and destructive aura appeared in his hand, and he slashed forward without any hesitation. With a scream, Zhou Sheng, who was behind eldest senior brother, was directly cut into two. He struggled and fell to the ground, turning into billowing black smoke and disappearing. Pow! With a soft sound, the yard master's figure disappeared, along with the dazzling light and the shadow of the sky-supporting peach tree. Chapter 14:21. At this moment, all the disciples of the peach garden had a glimmer of understanding. What they saw before them was the last bit of power that the yard master had left in this world. It meant that his life of dominating Haoyang had come to an end. Sorrow inevitably gushed out from the bottom of their hearts, shrouding their minds. But in reality, they had no time to immerse themselves in it, because Lin Xing had already barged in. He stepped through the void, majestic and powerful like a god. His eyes were filled with cold oppression that enveloped everyone. Just like before, this true sage was not someone who cared too much about his status. Hence, without any hesitation, he chose to attack directly. His target was Peach Girl. When he tore apart the barrier of the peach garden and stepped inside, Lin Xing saw with his own eyes that Peach Girl had used the power of the great path of the yard master to kill Zhou Sheng with a single strike. Although it was almost impossible for Peach Girl to attack again in her current situation, caution was a virtue that would never go out of style. He did not want to make the same mistake again. Moreover, since he had chosen to attack, he could not leave any of the peach garden's direct descendants alive. There was no need to explain the principle of cutting weeds at their roots. The eldest senior brother's figure moved and instantly disappeared. He appeared in front of Peach Girl and pressed his hand forward. Strictly speaking, he was now also a true saint. But the moment he had broken through, he had been tricked by Zhou Sheng and had been swallowed up. The power that he could erupt with now was extremely limited. With a loud bang, the eldest senior brother was sent flying. A large area of space was shattered as he chased after him like a dancing spear. In the blink of an eye, he was drenched in blood. Countless wounds appeared on his body. In the blink of an eye, the eldest senior brother had become a bloody gourd. The 1,000 faces flew out and hugged him. Unable to withstand the impact, he was sent tumbling away. The indifference in her eyes turned into a trace of pain. Then, just as she frowned, her face suddenly changed. It was still beautiful and charming, but there was a hint of coldness in the depths of the 1,000 faces' eyes. After his attack was blocked, Lin Sheng did not hesitate. He did not chase after the eldest senior brother and the eldest senior brother, who had been sent flying. He raised his hand and continued to attack Peach Girl. An extremely rich and dazzling golden light suddenly became the only color in the peach garden. It plated the surface of all objects with a layer of gold. 100 battles in the wild's entire body seemed to be burning. At the same time, what appeared in everyone's nostrils was actually a rich aroma of wine. Eldest senior brother, who was hugging 1,000 face, was frowning because of her sudden change of expression. At this moment, his pupils suddenly shrank. Oh no! Second junior brother touched that thing in the wine cellar. The wine cellar of the peach garden used the countless peach blossoms in the peach garden to continuously produce top-quality peach blossom wine. It was the best wine in the world, not only because of the wine's quality, but also because it was beneficial to the cultivation of cultivators. The peach blossom wine was extremely popular and was considered a hard currency in the Holy Tao circle. However, the wine cellar was in the peach blossom garden. Although it wasn't clearly marked, it was undoubtedly a forbidden area. Apart from the yard master, only eldest senior brother and second senior brother were qualified to enter. Even the most beloved peach girl had never stepped foot into it. Therefore, only eldest senior brother could understand what had happened to Baijania. The golden light was resplendent and dazzling, bringing with it endless majesty and pressure. However, Lin Shang felt something else from it. It fused with the golden light, ancient and gloomy, revealing a bloodthirsty and devouring desire. As the fragrance of the wine entered his body through his mouth and nose, Lin Sheng's consciousness was momentarily dazed. It was as if he was in a cold and gloomy wilderness. The howling wind brought with it a bone-piercing chill that penetrated into his body through his pores, as if it wanted to freeze and devour his soul. Lin Sheng's eyes focused, and bright light burst forth. Following his intuition, he didn't want to collide with Bai Zhanye. His figure moved and disappeared. The next moment, he appeared beside Peach Girl. With Peach Girl's current state, she couldn't pose any threat to a saint. She posed no threat to a saint, but for some reason, Lin Sheng could still feel a terrifying threat from her. Furthermore, as time passed, that feeling grew stronger and stronger. Because of this, Lin Sheng didn't hesitate to attack and tried to kill Peach Girl as quickly as possible. There was something wrong with Bai Zhanye. He should have used the most terrifying sealed artifact in the peach garden. If he wasn't mistaken, it should be the rumored thing that the yard master had trapped in the wine cellar. Lin Sheng had also heard some rumors about this thing. It was an inauspicious, horrifying, and dangerous object. In the past, even the powerful yard master could only choose to seal it away after obtaining it and use the peach garden's wine cellar to slowly extract and use its strength. Unless absolutely necessary, Lin Sheng didn't want to entangle himself with it. He didn't want to be contaminated by its aura and end up encountering unpredictable dangers. As his thoughts raced, Lin Sheng didn't hesitate. He lifted his hand and pressed it towards Peach Girl. Lei Xiaoyu suddenly shouted out loud. Her hands formed seals. Replace! Bang! Lin Sheng's strike came crashing down. Peach Girl, who should have died a violent death, suddenly turned into a puppet and was torn to pieces by the wild strength. And Peach Girl's figure appeared behind Iron Mountain and Earth Element. Beside her, Lei Xiaoyu spat out a mouthful of blood, her body tottering. Rescuing someone from a true saint naturally came with a price, but she only spat out a mouthful of blood. Comparatively speaking, this was a very light price to pay. Golden light recklessly erupted, as if a great sun had descended. It completely covered up 100 Battles' Wild's figure, so no one could see the golden runes that were being rapidly corroded by the blood-red light on his body. This allowed him to obtain an extremely formidable strength, but his consciousness was beginning to be contaminated. If not for his firm will, he would have long since become a puppet controlled by the sealed artifact. Seeing Lin Sheng avoid killing Peach Girl, 100 Battles Wild roared out loud. Terrifying golden light erupted, stacking up like magma as it tried to swallow Lin Sheng. From the very beginning, this had been a part of his plan. His master had already clearly informed him of how terrifying the sealed artifact in the wine cellar was. Thus, when he used it, 100 Battles Wild had already expected that he would inevitably meet his end. Thus, he wanted to drag Lin Sheng into this mess. As long as he succeeded, it would be difficult for him to escape, and he would no longer be able to cause any harm to the peach garden. To perish together, this was probably the last thing that 100 Battles Wild could do for the peach garden, for his fellow disciples, juniors, and juniors. However, a saint's intuition was extremely powerful and could detect danger in advance. Lin Sheng had clearly sensed the strange aura of the sealed artifact and didn't want to fight him at all. The golden light recklessly spread out like a tide. Before Lin Sheng could be sucked into it, he took a step forward and disappeared. A true saint was naturally well versed in the Tao of space. It was almost impossible to lock onto him if he was focused on dodging. The next moment he reappeared. Lin Sheng raised his hand and pressed down. Lei Xiaoyu was powerless to continue using a substitute. Tai Shan and Tu Xing, who were standing in front of Peach Girl, roared at the same time. The bones in his body crackled. Tai Shan's body suddenly grew in size. His exposed skin revealed a thick metallic hue. At the same time, Tu Xing pressed his hands behind his back. A rich earthen yellow light erupted, covering his body layer after layer. Lin Xing frowned, and a gloomy look flashed in his eyes. He hadn't expected that the disciples of the Peach Garden would have the courage to resist a true saint. More importantly, their resistance had actually been effective. A true saint had attacked repeatedly, but they hadn't even been able to touch a single hair on Peach Girl. Losing face was only a small part of it, because Lin Sheng didn't care about such superficial things. What he was truly angry about was the uneasiness that was rapidly accumulating in his heart after his repeated attacks had failed. It was as if something terrible was about to happen. What could it be? The disciples of the Peach Garden were no threat to him at all. Even if they could barely resist for now, it was only a matter of time before they were killed. Could it be that the Peach Garden Master had other trump cards hidden in the Peach Garden? No, if that was the case, she would have already used them to help the Peach Garden's first disciple smoothly break through to the true saint realm. She wouldn't have waited until now. Or could it be that Qinyu was coming back? Thinking of this, Lin Sheng's heartbeat accelerated. He took a deep breath and steadied his mind. They hadn't warned him, so it wasn't likely that he would come back. After all, that person was still detecting the changes in his aura. Moreover, what could he do even if he came back? After all, they were the ones who wanted to move against the Peach Garden today. He didn't want to think about it anymore. He had to end this quickly. Lin Sheng's eyes turned cold, and he increased the strength of his attacks. The layers of earthy yellow light around Iron Mountain only lasted for a moment before they were shattered. Earth Element spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent tumbling backwards. Iron Mountain had only lasted a breath of time longer than him, but he had also paid a greater price. Large tracts of his flesh cracked open, creating terrifying wounds that were so deep that bones could be seen. Thus, one could clearly see that his flesh had been broken into countless pieces. With just a single strike, Lin Sheng had nearly killed Iron Mountain and Earth Element. If his targets had been the two of them, he could have easily killed them with a single strike. Lei Xiaoyu wiped the blood from the corners of her mouth and struggled to stand up. Peach Girl reached out and pulled her back. Her expression was indifferent and without the least bit of fear. She said in a soft voice, "Don't worry about me," she no longer coughed, and a faint blush even appeared on her pale face. But the more she looked like this, the more one had a bad premonition. Lei Xiaoyu's eyes turned red, and she couldn't help but bite her lips. Senior Apprentice, Sister Peach. Peach Girl's lips curved up in a faint smile. "If there's a chance, find a way to survive and tell Qinyu who your enemy is." The restlessness in Lin Sheng's heart became increasingly thick. For some reason, he couldn't suppress his anger. He coldly sneered, "So what if Qinyu returns?" In this seat's eyes, the so-called 9 in the Peach Garden are like the midday sun is just a joke. Let alone the fact that he isn't here today. Even if he does return, he will only be destroyed along with the Peach Garden. There was no need to waste time arguing with them. Those people were doomed to die, so the sooner they were killed, the sooner things would end. Lin Sheng lifted a hand and a phantom appeared in his palm. One could faintly make out the outline of a sword. It was blurry, but it constantly released an icy cold and annihilating aura. If he wanted to cut the weeds and eliminate the roots of the peach garden, then killing Peach Girl was undoubtedly the most important task. Lin Xing didn't want to leave behind any hidden dangers in the future because of his own carelessness. So, since he had to kill them, he had to use the most foolproof method. If one died beneath the shadow sword of the dead, their soul would be instantly dismembered and then swallowed up by the shadow sword, leaving nothing behind. Like this, even if a ruler were to take action in the future and forcefully reverse the river of time, they still wouldn't be able to revive them. Whoosh! The shadow sword whistled through the air as it cut towards Peach Girl and Lei Xiaoyu. In this intensely restless state, Lin Sheng believed that it was best to kill them as efficiently as possible. But just as the shadow sword was about to cut through their bodies, Lin Sheng's pupils violently shrank. His soul instinctively screamed as the thick shadow of death shrouded his mind. If he continued to attack, he could kill Peach Girl and Lei Xiaoyu, but there was a high chance he would also die on the spot. A saint naturally cherished his life. Lin Sheng drew back. He lifted a hand and thrust out, causing space to violently shake like a raging tide in a raging sea. However, before this spatial tsunami could truly erupt, it was like a fragile bubble that was directly pierced through. "I've returned. I want to see just how you will destroy the peach garden." Chapter 1422. Lin Sheng's pupils constricted as his face contorted. It wasn't that he was a coward and was scared stiff by a single sentence. Instead, a fist drilled out from the space that had been pierced. Light surged on its surface, giving off a jade-like feeling. It ignored the obscure aura around Lin Sheng and landed on his chest. Violent, destructive energy surged out. His chest immediately caved in. Although no sound could be heard, many of his ribs must have been broken. Fresh blood gushed out from his mouth and nose. Peach Garden 9 Qinyu. Hearing the voice and receiving a heavy punch, the uneasiness in Lin Sheng's heart finally cleared up. The first thought that came to his mind was that they had purposely set up a trap for him. Their target had probably been him from the very beginning. First, misjudging the barrier of the peach garden was one of them. Second, not knowing that the head disciple of the peach garden wanted to break through 2 realms was the third. With the strength of that person in the darkness, if he really locked onto the location of the peach blossom garden, he would be able to sense any changes in his aura. It would be impossible for him not to sense Qin Yu's return. However, even at this moment, he had already suffered a heavy punch, yet he still hadn't received any warning. As the saying goes, it can happen once, twice, but not thrice. There was definitely a problem here. They wanted to borrow the hands of the peach garden to complete the hunt for me. Thinking of this, Lin Sheng's heart began to panic. He was truly afraid. That was because he knew very well exactly what sort of person he was facing. Lin Sheng's figure was blasted back by the powerful force, and blood spurted out from his mouth and nose. At the same time, Lin Sheng turned around and left. He was extremely decisive. The reason that prompted him to make this decision was, of course, their malice. Even if he was the true saint of the Nirvana realm, a top-notch, peerless master in the world, he did not have the slightest confidence to resist. Secondly, there was the strength that Qin Yu had erupted with. Although it was only a single fist, it gave off a feeling of invincibility. Outside the Lost Garden, Qin Yu had joined forces with the Garden Master to slaughter the Netherworld Saint, allowing him to become a formidable existence that could stand on equal footing with a true saint. But in fact, at the level of a saint, most of the credit was given to the Yard Master. They believed that Qin Yu might be powerful, but at most he only possessed a small portion of the ability that could rival a true saint. In the end, not everyone was like the Eastern Sea Dragon Sage, who was able to clearly understand the strength that Qin Yu possessed. Lin Sheng discovered his own mistake. He hadn't given Qin Yu enough attention, but soon he would discover that his mistake was far greater than he had imagined. If the true saint of the Nirvana realm wanted to retreat and escape, even if he were to face several people of the same level as him. There was a high probability that he would be able to escape. At most, he would have to pay a price. Only sovereigns could directly seal off a part of the world and turn it into a cage. Only then could they seal off all paths of escape, making it impossible for saints to escape. Qin Yu wasn't a ruler, but he had a way to stop Lin Sheng from fleeing without hesitation. As Lin Sheng was running away, his complexion suddenly changed. He turned around and saw that Qin Yu had appeared beside him, his face expressionless. Throughout the entire process, there was no fluctuation of aura at all. If not for the fact that a true divine senses were strong enough, he wouldn't have been able to detect it. What kind of technique is this? The answer was the hidden god. The Zeroth world was one of the 5 inherited divine abilities obtained from the ruler's residence. If the ruler's avatar were to vaguely remind him, it would be extremely troublesome. However, reality proved that the sovereign's avatar was a liar, so her words were naturally untrustworthy. Of course, even if this was true, that was a matter for the future. It was impossible for Qin Yu to abandon a powerful inherited divine ability that he had already obtained just because of a few words from her. Returning to the main point, the so-called hidden god referred to restraining one's divine sense and using one's body as a furnace to constantly temper it, making it stronger and stronger. Strong. But the divine abilities of a ruler weren't ordinary. Hidden God wasn't just limited to this. There was another meaning to it. Or perhaps it could be called a transliteration, hiding. By using one's divine sense as a guide, after locking onto a target, one could stick to their aura and move with it, becoming like a shadow following a body, quietly escaping danger without being detected. This was similar to the ability to defend oneself with a shield. Because Qin Yu's cultivation was shallow, he didn't know the specifics. But when he gathered all 5 inherited divine abilities into one, he had a faint intuition that these 5 divine abilities weren't separate entities. Rather, they were connected to each other, or rather, they fused together and complemented each other. But this wasn't the important point. The important point was that Qin Yu knew the answer, but he wouldn't tell Lin Sheng, nor would he tell him. The moment he returned, he had already decided that he wouldn't let this old brat go. He would smash him to pieces. As his fist punched out, Qin Yu was like a jade statue. His entire body surged with light, giving off an ancient and formidable feeling. Lin Sheng had already suffered a loss. So, as he saw Qin Yu punch out, he didn't hesitate at all. His figure flickered, wanting to continue retreating. But at this time he discovered that the air around him was incomparably thick, turning into some powerful imprisonment that covered him within. The more he struggled, the stronger the shaking imprisonment power became, firmly suppressing him and making it impossible for him to dodge. Seeing the fist howl towards him, Lin Sheng clenched his teeth in anger. He crossed his hands in front of him, and with a dull, thumping sound, as if a great bell had been struck, the phantom of a great bell appeared and covered him. Qin Yu's fist smashed into the phantom of the bell. The object trembled and then violently shook. Invisible shock waves crashed into it, causing Lin Sheng's complexion to change again and again. His eyes were filled with anger and even more fear. Defense was equal to jade, and it was still a transliteration of furnace. This was probably the reason why, when Qin Yu attacked, his entire body seemed to be made of jade. And what imprisoned Lin Sheng, making it difficult for him to escape, was the shield defense. The word defense itself had the meaning of restriction. But here, Qin Yu had reversed its ability and pulled Lin Sheng into the supernatural ability. But he wasn't the master of the supernatural ability, so while he obtained the defense, he also had to withstand its restrictions. Of course, this had great limitations. He had to use it at close range in order to smoothly pull the enemy in. Otherwise, with the keen senses of a saint, he would immediately be able to dodge. Only by using it together with the hidden divinity could it have such a powerful effect, causing Lin Sheng to directly fall into it. "You can't escape," Qin Yu icily said, giving Lin Sheng a powerful psychological pressure. At the same time he punched out, the defense attack seemed simple, as if it was just a jade-like appearance, but it actually contained countless mysteries and power. This was what it meant to turn the complex into the simple. Every fist contained a terrifying power, and Lin Sheng was well aware of this. Dong, the bell phantom, violently shook. It was originally an illusory and invisible object, but now it was forcefully bestowed with some kind of substantialized strength. The signs that appeared were that as the bell phantom shook, it began to rapidly solidify, and once it became solid, it would find it difficult to resist the invading strength that came from the shaking. Kacha! Kacha! Cracking sounds rang out one after another. Lin Sheng's complexion changed again and again. He knew that he had underestimated Qin Yu's strength, but he never imagined that this peach garden 9 would have so many strange methods. As a true saint of the other shore, he was actually suppressed in front of Qin Yu, unable to even escape. Bang! The third fist smashed apart the bell phantom. Lin Sheng spat out blood once more, the fear in his eyes no longer visible. He couldn't hide it. He never imagined that today, in a situation where he hadn't even seen the ruler, he would end up in such a pitiful state. Zhou Sheng, if you don't help us, then both of us will die here today. The moment his scream fell, the pale Zhou Sheng appeared. Although he had a way to avoid the killing blow from the Garden Master Great Tao, he had still paid a heavy price to do so. As for Lin Sheng, he clearly knew of this ahead of time. Were these two people colluding with each other? Or was there something else going on? Zhou Sheng's complexion was dignified, and a sharp light exploded in his eyes. His figure flickered, but he didn't rush towards Qin Yu. Instead, he chose to attack Peach Girl. Besiege way to rescue Zhao, this could be interpreted as such. He had clearly sensed that Qin Yu was placing some importance on him. Big brother Qin. Lei, Xiao Yu screamed out in panic. The pleasant surprise in her eyes froze, turning into endless fear. Lin Sheng took a deep breath. He stared at Qin Yu. As long as Qin Yu helped him, he would immediately find a chance to escape. Pa! Qin Yu snapped his fingers. As Zhou Sheng rushed towards Peach Girl and Lei Xiaoyu, his complexion changed. He reared his head back and roared. Billowing black energy erupted outwards. Countless ghosts screamed and howled, wildly tearing at the surrounding void. But soon, Zhou Sheng's complexion became incomparably ugly. He was being imprisoned by an invisible force and was being forcefully pulled towards Qin Yu. Did you think that I didn't discover you? Qin Yu sneered. He slammed his hands together, and the two defensive shields fused together. What it could do was not only increase his own defense, but it could also be used on others. What Qin Yu did was to lay down a defensive shield in front of Peach Girl and Lei Xiaoyu, and then wait for Zhou Sheng to come to him on his own. Otherwise, if he suddenly attacked, it would have been very difficult to imprison two true saints at once. It was because of this that Qin Yu deliberately allowed Zhou Sheng to sense that he was paying extra attention to Peach Girl. If it weren't for this, how could this ghost path true saint obediently fall into his trap? Lin Sheng and Zhou Sheng were both shocked and angry. With their intelligence, they naturally understood that Qin Yu had long since intended to kill the two of them. This was why he had made such an arrangement. He actually dared to fight against two true saints with just one strike. How arrogant was he! Let's work together and kill him. As they roared, the two true saints attacked at the same time. After witnessing Qin Yu's strange and powerful techniques, they indeed had no confidence in killing him alone. But if the two of them worked together, with the addition of one true saint and one true saint, they might be able to kill Qin Yu. Of course, more importantly, the situation was already clear. Qin Yu was not willing to let them go, so they could only give it their all. If they killed him, everything might still go back on track. Perhaps this was their arrangement, or rather their choice. If they put Qin Yu together with the two of them, no matter who survived in the end, they would be able to get what they wanted. In the corner of their eyes, Lin Sheng and Zhou Sheng's eyes flashed with anger at the same time. It was obvious that they had thought of the same thing. Of course, Qin Yu did not know what the two true saints in front of him were thinking. But this was not important, because he did not care at all. Because the dead did not need to understand. He wanted to kill the true saints, not only because of the damage they had done to the peach garden, but also because of another important reason. Vast Yang was already in chaos, and a great change was about to happen. Qin Yu had to use blood as a warning to bring peace to the peach garden. Without a doubt, the death of the two true saints of the Nirvana realm was enough. Chapter 14:23. As long as one walked, they would leave behind a trace, and these traces could be seen as a shadow beneath their feet. No one could escape their own shadow, and no one could hide the traces they left behind. But everything in this world had limitations and limits. Any objective truth would inevitably become a part of it. In other words, exceptions always existed. It was just that you hadn't come into contact with them yet, or perhaps you didn't have the qualifications. The shadowless stood aloof from the world and jumped out of the rules. Thus, it was impossible to record them, and they wouldn't leave behind any traces of themselves. And in order to have the qualifications to do this, one had to be at the ruler realm, or one had to possess some sort of power at the ruler level. Without a doubt, Qin Yu, who had returned to the peach garden without causing any fluctuations, was clearly a shadowless. On the round platform in the grand hall, the two black-robed people who had worked together to pollute the peach garden's first disciple's aura and nearly caused him to break through were now respectfully kneeling. The originally dark and hazy grand hall now had an even more obscure feeling. In the darkness, strange whispers spread out and entered the ears of the two people. After several breaths of time, the whispers vanished. The candlelight in the grand hall became slightly brighter than before. The two people kneeling on the round platform stood up. Large black robes covered their bodies from head to toe. It was impossible to see their expressions, but one could still feel a trace of solemnity. Shadowless. A deep and low voice sounded out from beneath the black robes. Although it seemed extremely light, it also seemed to hide countless emotions. The black-robed figure lightly said, "Everything in this world is fair. There are gains and losses. If you want this chance, then I will give it to you. Humph. Sometimes opportunities also mean dangers. If you are willing to give it up on your own initiative, then you must have sensed something." The black-robed figure was silent for a moment. "If you are willing to share it, then I will owe you a favor." The black-robed figure shook his head. "If I was really prepared, I wouldn't have given this chance to you. There is danger, but it isn't clear. There is no need for you to probe me." The black-robed figure's eyes narrowed, revealing a scrutinizing look. But in the end, he didn't find anything. "Then let me take a look and see just what sort of secrets Peach Garden 9's Qin Yu is hiding." Within the shield, Zhou Sheng and Lin Sheng had ugly complexions. Their eyes were gloomy and cold, and they couldn't help but feel a trace of fear in their hearts. They had already acknowledged Peach Garden 9's strength, but now they discovered that he was far stronger than they had imagined. This was not referring to the cultivation level of the other party, but rather to the other party's strange, yet incomparably powerful techniques. The two true sages were actually suppressed even after working together. No, using the word suppression to describe it was not very appropriate, because if they allowed the situation to continue to deteriorate, the two sages were very sure that they would eventually be completely suppressed and killed bit by bit. He came to this conclusion because all of Zhou Sheng and Lin Sheng's attempts to break the shield defense and escape from the imprisonment had ended in failure. As for the Qin Yu in front of them, his entire body surged with light as if he were made of jade. Every punch of his contained a strength that made their hearts race. And what was most terrifying was that as time passed, the number of times Qin Yu attacked increased, and the strength of each fist grew increasingly strong. It was as if he was using the two true sages as experimental subjects to continuously deepen and strengthen his control over this technique. It was simply terrifying. It was clear that Qin Yu hadn't been able to fully grasp the full might that could erupt from the jade body. No, looking at the progress he had made, this was only an extremely limited portion of its true might. There was no need for complete control. As long as he could take another step forward and raise his control to a new level, his lethality would skyrocket. Although there didn't seem to be any terrifying signs right now, Qin Yu was progressing with every passing moment. When these tiny improvements piled up together, there would eventually be a qualitative change. At that time, the only thing that awaited the two of them would probably be being imprisoned and beaten to death, since he had already predicted this tragic and terrifying ending. As a true Nirvana saint, he was naturally unwilling to sit still and wait for death. Zhou, Xing took a deep breath. We can't delay any longer. We have to get out of here as soon as possible. As soon as he said this, his face showed that he was in pain and he growled in a low voice. Black gas burst out from the pores all over his body. At the same time, all the exposed flesh and blood on the surface of his body quickly rotted and melted. Then, as if thrown into a flame, they were quickly burned to ashes, and then more black gas burst out. In the blink of an eye, all of Saint Zhou's flesh and blood had disappeared. The robe he was wearing had long since been completely corroded by the black mist. What appeared in the black fog was a terrifying skeleton. The bones on its entire body were pitch black as if they were full. It seemed to have swallowed sticky ink. No, it was more accurate to say that this was a skeleton where all of its flesh and blood had disappeared, but its organs were perfectly preserved. A thick, translucent membrane completely wrapped around the organs in its abdominal cavity. One could faintly see their wriggling movements, as well as the powerful beating heart. Within its empty eye sockets, black flames burned. Black fog lingered around its body. This skeleton was like a soul-reaping messenger from hell. It opened its mouth and emitted a silent scream. A terrifying soul attack was like a sharp thorn that crazily shot towards Qin Yu. The sun-moon force field that rose from the east and set in the west violently shook. It was like countless boulders were tumbling into the water under a landslide. Within the purple moon and blue sun, there were light cracking sounds, as if they couldn't withstand the strength and were on the verge of shattering. Two illusory female faces appeared on the surface of the purple moon and blue sun. They were slightly twisted, revealing pained expressions. This was the first time something like this had occurred. It also proved how powerful a true Nirvana saint was. The soul attack that erupted from him was actually able to directly injure the purple moon and blue sun. At the same time, Qin Yu's body inevitably fell into a momentary stiffness. The pain was like countless sharp wooden stakes stabbing into his brain and constantly stirring it. He took a deep breath and stabilized his mind. He formed a seal with his hands and shouted, "Hidden spirit!" Swish! The soul aura that belonged to Qin Yu disappeared in an instant. It was as if it was covered by an invisible barrier, or as if it had directly escaped into another space that could not be reached. The terrifying soul attack from the great Zhou Saint skeleton suddenly lost its target. But this did not mean that Qin Yu could completely block it. The soul attack from the great Zhou Saint skeleton was greatly reduced at most, and the damage he suffered was greatly reduced. But at this moment, Qin Yu had a clear intuition. If he cultivated the hidden spirit to a high level and completely controlled its power, it would not be impossible to completely block the soul attack. Shield guard. The power around the imprisonment suddenly changed. It was no longer as sticky as mud. Instead, it was filled with an illusory and faintly discernible aura, and it was the appearance of this aura that completely blocked the remaining soul attack from the great Zhou Saint skeleton. What a defensive technique could block was not only the supply of physical power, but also the damage at the level of the soul. And this was far from the limit of the shield guard's defense. Although he only had a rough understanding of it, Qin Yu could still sense the scope of its abilities. Besides physical defense and soul defense, there were also all kinds of mysterious, curse-like powers within its defensive range. Of course, just like the hidden spirit, this was an ability that could only be gradually controlled after one cultivated to an extremely high level. The great Zhou Saint Puppet body could clearly feel that the impact of his soul had been blocked. The black flames in his eye sockets surged, and the black mist around him was instantly ignited. His entire person was like an evil spirit wrapped in endless black flames. The violent, terrifying, and destructive aura around him soared. "Saint Lin!" A strange and deep voice came from the mouth of the skeleton. It was like two hard stones violently colliding and rubbing against each other. As it spoke, the skeleton took a step forward and struck out with its hand. "Gate of perished nations." Dong, the place where the black bone fist struck, violently shook. Darkness accompanied it, rapidly spreading outwards. It was like thick ink dripping into clear water. And at the same time, an illusory gate appeared in the shaking darkness. It was translucent, and one couldn't clearly see the world behind it. Darkness and withered yellow wove together, like some endless wilderness. Strong winds howled between the heavens and the earth, occasionally outlining hideous and terrifying ghost faces. As if sensing the fluctuations of the gate of perished nations, and as if sensing the delicious smell of flesh and blood hidden behind the gate, the howling winds in the wilderness suddenly became violent. One after another, illusory and ferocious ghost faces appeared in the wild wind and rushed towards the gate of the doomed nation. They were like giant hands that were striving to be the first to push the gate of the doomed nation open. And at this time, Saint Lin acted. The reason why he was so fast was because when great Zhou Saint turned into a skeleton, he had already made preparations. He was only waiting for a signal. Between saints, there was no need to discuss things too carefully. With just a glance or a movement, they could understand each other's thoughts. "Fallen stars!" Saint Lin raised his hand towards the gate of perished nations. A mysterious, and majestic voice came from his mouth. At this moment, he was like a monarch that controlled the heavens. All the movements of the stars had to obey his will. Therefore, in the next moment, through the gate of the perished nation, one could vaguely see that the sky above the wasteland was suddenly dyed red. Blazing meteors tore through the clouds in a cold and resolute manner, burning wantonly as they charged towards the ground. Flames and perished nations were two naturally hostile forces. The moment the burning meteors arrived, they inevitably erupted into a fierce conflict. But at this moment, great Zhou Saint's skeleton howled. The wild winds in the wilderness of perished nations suddenly rushed into the sky, directly fusing with the burning meteors. So the blazing tongues of fire instantly turned a gloomy greenish-white color, emitting a cold and ghostly aura. Between the swaying tongues of fire, ghost faces appeared one after another. Boom, boom! With a heaven-shaking explosion, the contaminated meteors smashed into the gate of perished nations, forcefully opening it. "Let's go." Great Zhou Saint's skeleton growled and reached out to grab Lin Sheng. Their figures moved, directly passing through the gate and entering the world of the dead. But at this moment, a trace of fear suddenly exploded in their hearts. The two saints suddenly turned their heads and saw that the rapidly closing gate of perished nations seemed to be blocked by some invisible force. Qin Yu took a step forward, crossed the illusory gate, and directly chased after them. Whoosh! The wild winds billowed his robes, and his black hair fluttered. The incomparably powerful aura of flesh and blood of the body of rules quickly spread out. Rumble! Compared to the summoning of great Zhou Saint skeleton, the wild winds suddenly blew up. Terrifying and ferocious faces locked onto Qin Yu with greed and fanaticism. As they howled, they swept up the wild winds and rushed towards him, wanting to devour this tempting food. A cold light exploded in Qin Yu's eyes. But at this moment his heart stirred. He flipped his palm, and a small blood jade coffin appeared. This was the ghost path treasure that he had obtained from the Avicii saint in the soulless world. At this moment, there was no need for Chinyu to activate it. The blood jade coffin wildly expanded, and in the blink of an eye it was thousands of feet in size. Then the coffin opened on its own. Chinyu didn't know if it was an illusion, but he vaguely saw a pair of blood-red eyes within. The feeling of being watched disappeared in a flash. Then a terrifying, devouring power erupted from the blood jade coffin. The greedy and fanatical ghost faces that rushed towards Chinyu suddenly twisted, revealing expressions of extreme fear. As they screamed, they gathered up the wild winds and prepared to flee, but they found that they had already lost control of their bodies. Their consciousness was very clear, but they could not control themselves. They could only passively continue to gather the wild winds, and the moment they approached the blood jade coffin, they were swallowed up. It was like an endless black hole, rumbling as it swallowed the ghost faces in the wind. In the blink of an eye, it formed a terrifying vortex, a secret treasure of the ghost path. Zhou Sheng's pupils violently shrank, a look of horror on his face. The ghost path had been washed away by the river of time, nearly vanishing into thin air. He had never thought of this possibility. Chinyu of the 9 paths of the Peach Garden was a ghost path cultivator, and his strength was extremely terrifying. This was proven by the aura and might of the blood jade coffin. Anger and disbelief wove together, and he couldn't help but feel that this was a bit absurd. But at this time, Zhou Sheng wasn't in the mood to think about such things. Let's go. Since Chinyu was also a ghost path powerhouse, then the aura of a destroyed country was no longer a restriction to him. Rather, it could be used by him to erupt with an even greater strength. In this sort of situation, the best choice was to take advantage of the fact that he wasn't imprisoned again and flee as fast as possible. Lin Sheng also realized this. Without a word, he turned and left. The 2 true saints didn't separate and flee. This was because they weren't sure whether or not they could escape Chinyu's pursuit. If the 2 of them joined forces, they might have a chance against Chinyu. But if they separated, all that awaited them was death. And what happened next proved that Zhou Sheng and Lin Sheng were right to be cautious, but they couldn't feel the slightest bit of comfort from this. In the midst of their rapid escape, the 2 true saints froze in place at the same time. They looked up at the dusky sky of the world of the dead, and their faces instantly turned pale. Then their bodies began to tremble uncontrollably. They didn't know what was going to happen next, but their instincts gave them a great warning. In the next moment, Chinyu's cold voice rang in their ears. Defensive attack! Chapter 1424. After all, Zhou Sheng and Lin Sheng were at the peak of Haoying Peak of the Nirvana realm. They were extremely powerful, especially Zhou Sheng, who was an elusive and unpredictable cultivator of the ghost path. With his current cultivation, he was confident he could kill them. But he wasn't confident he could guarantee that the others in the Peach Garden wouldn't suffer a counterattack before they died. So if it was just purely killing people to establish his prestige, Chinyu could have done it long ago. The reason why he had waited until now was because he was waiting for Zhou Sheng and Lin Sheng to escape. He was waiting for them to leave the Peach Blossom Garden, waiting for them to appear in a place where they could be watched by everyone. And now, the 2 saints who had escaped through the gate of the perished nation had undoubtedly fulfilled the requirements. So Chinyu didn't wait any longer. In fact, he couldn't wait any longer. Even though he'd only glanced at Peach earlier, he'd already noticed that she was in a bad state. He had to deal with the 2 saints as soon as possible so that he could return to the Peach Blossom Garden and stabilize her condition. So at this moment, Chinyu attacked without hesitation. He erupted with the strongest attack he had ever grasped. The word defense could be translated as jade, but since it was called defense, it meant that the word defense was the essence. And since Chinyu wanted to kill them to establish his prestige, He naturally had to choose the most eye-catching and dazzling method. He would kill the two saints without giving them the slightest chance to resist. The stronger they showed today, the more efficient they would be in killing the saints, and the safer the peach garden would be in the future. Suddenly, a large expanse of crimson red appeared in the gray sky of the fallen kingdom, as if a volcano had been toppled and was pouring out endless magma. They spread wantonly, and in the blink of an eye, they ignited the entire sky. In the next moment, it really started burning. Bang, bang, bang. Amidst the terrifying sound waves that shook the hearts of the people, one meteor after another smashed through the burning sky, smashing towards the ground in a determined manner. Their target was clearly the two saints who were frozen in place, their faces pale and bodies trembling uncontrollably. Ah! Zhou Sheng roared. In his skeletal form, his voice sounded like rocks rubbing against each other. It was filled with fear and madness. At this moment, he felt an intense threat of death. He could even smell the cold and decaying scent of death. As a ghost cultivator, he wasn't unfamiliar with this smell. His soul instinctively shivered and wailed. We can't just sit here and wait for death. He had to do something, or he would really be killed today. Bang! Black flames shot into the sky, and a huge bone giant appeared. It raised its arms to protect Zhou Sheng. However, this was far from enough. The giant bone let out a pained roar, and with a light cautious sound, the space between its eyebrows ruptured. Like a gate that had been opened, countless departed souls flew out from the crack between its eyebrows. Then, in the next moment, they let out miserable screams before shattering and dissipating. They turned into a thick and viscous bloody light that covered the surface of the giant skeleton's body before being absorbed and fused with it. One after another, the souls of the deceased were so numerous that it was hard to count them all. The bloody light they formed was like a river of blood bursting through its banks. Lin Sheng! An anxious roar came from within the bloody light. Shua! Lin Sheng's figure moved, and he directly rushed toward the blood light. It opened up a crack on its own, allowing him to enter the giant bone's body. Without the slightest hesitation, Lin Sheng raised his hand and pointed at the sky. This place forbids the invasion of foreign objects. The laws between heaven and earth shook, and formless distortions immediately appeared, covering the entire region of the destroyed country. It was as if he was the embodiment of heaven and earth, and every word he said represented his will. As his finger fell, Lin Sheng pointed a second finger. This place forbids the burning of flames. Then a third finger. This place attracts departed souls. The laws of the world wildly twisted. But at this time in the burning skies, the howling meteor had already arrived, colliding with the first law distortion. The meteor's falling speed came to a sudden halt, as if it were blocked by an invisible strength. But this state only lasted for a short period of time before it was forcefully broken by the meteor that followed. Lin Sheng stuffily coughed, and blood flowed out from the corners of his lips. The meteor roared as it hurtled towards the second law distortion. The flames on its surface immediately dimmed, and a great deal of the annihilating aura it released dissipated. The giant skeleton roared out loud. He raised his hands above his head. With a heaven-shaking rumble, there was a series of explosions like thunderclaps. At this moment, the distant skies suddenly turned dark, as if dark clouds were rapidly spreading out. What followed was a soul-shaking despair. It was like in this darkness there was a controller of souls, a ruler of the world of death, a formidable existence that no one could contend with. Lin Sheng's eyes flashed with joy. This was because this was the result he wanted. Thus, he had changed the law with the third sentence. He wanted to use the strength of a subjugated kingdom to stop Qinyu. Reality was better than he expected. The power of the law distortion had actually drawn in the monarch of a subjugated kingdom, an existence that stood at the peak of the world of death. Of course, this couldn't rule out the possibility that this cunning and callous monarch of a subjugated kingdom had already locked onto this battle and had been hiding in the shadows. Now he was simply taking advantage of the situation to make a move. After all, swallowing the flesh and blood of powerhouses and enslaving their souls was the eternal passion of a subjugated kingdom's monarch. As for fishing in troubled waters, that was their style of doing things. But this wasn't important. Even if the subjugated kingdom's monarch had ill intentions, the powerful Chinyu should still be its first choice. After all, the flesh and blood aura of a body of rules was like an irresistible poison to the departed souls. Two blood, red eyes lit up in the darkness. They were as large as lanterns and exuded a formidable pressure. As it looked down, it couldn't hide the greed in its eyes. It had been a long, long time since it had encountered such a delicious and tempting meal. But as the subjugated kingdom's monarch was preparing to step out of the darkness and do something, Chinyu suddenly looked up. It was like midwinter had arrived. A terrifying cold aura gushed out from the depths of its heart. The subjugated kingdom's monarch wasn't sure what methods Chinyu had. Moreover, although his aura was strong, it wasn't something the subjugated kingdom's monarch couldn't contend with. But at this moment, it felt a deep threat. It even made the subjugated kingdom's monarch feel as if it could perish at any moment. Its restless thoughts instantly vanished. The giant, lantern-like, blood, red eyes gazed deeply at Chinyu, as if it wanted to remember his appearance. The approaching darkness rapidly retreated, even faster than it had arrived. In the blink of an eye, it vanished from sight. Lin Sheng's eyes widened. His chest shook, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. He ran a dignified, subjugated kingdom's monarch, a terrifying existence that could suppress a true saint within the subjugated kingdom's domain, had actually been scared away like this. And all of this had been accomplished with just a single glance from Chinyu. A cold chill gushed out from the depths of his heart, causing his complexion to pale. Lin Sheng began to confirm that attacking the Peach Blossom Garden was an extremely wrong choice from the start. The Peach Blossom Garden's Chinyu was terrifyingly strong. He was far more terrifying than anyone had imagined.